King of France. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176. General Frost asks you to support the Italian cause of independence. The city of Diego is not big, but it looks very rich. After all, this is a city in northern Italy, which has accumulated wealth for so many years. In real history, after Messina conquered the city of Diego, he immediately let his soldiers plunder. The poor Italian legion soldiers entered the city of Diego with green eyes, and robbed food, money and women. But Ning's Italian legion is different. Ning's legion is fed with the property of the church, and it is more stable. In addition, Ning has always strictly restrained the troops and prohibited looting, so the troops can do not harm the slightest after entering the city. When Ning arrived at the city gate, he saw several Italians wearing liberty caps and holding tricolor flags to welcome the French army. These people shouted to the French troops entering the city, "Long live freedom! Hello, liberators!" Ning came up to the group of people, pulled the reins to stop the horse, and asked curiously, "Hello, gentlemen. Hello, General." The leading Italian took off his hat and saluted Ning. "Hello to the Free France." Ning, "Hello. May I ask who you are?" "I am Italian, and I have fought for the independence of Italy all my life." It turned out that they were Italian independence activists. The National Assembly in Paris sent out the Italian Legion under the banner of liberating Italy and making Italy independent. Ning smiled and said, "So you are Italian revolutionaries, great, we are here to liberate you. When my chief of staff arrives, he will sell you Italian independence bonds, and you can buy them with any kind of silver coins. Gold coins are also fine." The expression of this member of the Italian independence movement froze on his face. "Bonds. Yes, bonds. The French army will fight for your independence. To do this, you only need to buy independence bonds. Of course, if you don't have money, you can also join the War of Italian Independence in person. We will establish the Free Italian Army to assist the French army in fighting." Ning said with a smile on his face. Before he set out, he came to raise funds for the next step of development, so he had already made plans. Local gentry who support Italian independence must purchase Italian independence bonds to express their support for the cause of Italian independence. In order to give them this channel to express their support for Italian independence, Ning used precious transportation capacity to transport bonds. Those bonds were printed on craft paper and were very heavy. For local gentry who do not support Italian independence, there is no need to ask. For such Italian traitors, lampposts are their destination. The French army has the obligation to punish these Italian traitors on behalf of the Italians. And the property is naturally used to support the cause of Italian independence. Ning is very serious about promoting the cause of Italian independence. The news of Marshal Bulli's disastrous defeat in the Battle of Diego quickly spread to Vienna. At this time, there was no large-scale battle on the front line, only some minor frictions, so everyone's attention was attracted by the news of this secondary battlefield. When Queen Marie in Vienna heard the news, she immediately broke a valuable cup she brought from Paris. "Why is it this Frost again?" Queen Marie cursed as she watched the maid pick up the broken pieces of the cup. "When can I get rid of this cobbler?" Today, Louis V rarely did not fiddle with his locks, but accompanied his wife to drink tea. He did not seem to care much. This shows that our French army still has an advantage over the Austrian army. Marie glared at her husband. "It's time, and you are still proud of the French army. The French army is no longer your army. It is the Austrian army that is fighting for you now." Louis V's face tightened. "Okay, it's the Austrian army. My fault. But why are you so angry? Italy is just a secondary battlefield. Frost in Italy is better than winning in the front, right?" Marie bit her lip. "You are right. His victory in Italy is better than winning in the front. But I just think the news of his victory is annoying. It is because of this Frost that we have fallen to this point. Just think about it. It was he who captured the Bastille, it was he who refused to give face to the three-level parliament to discuss in groups in Versailles, and it was he who forced us to move from Versailles to Paris. Living so close to a bunch of damn trouser men. I think we should send someone to his hometown to capture his family, and then let him come to Vienna to redeem them." Louis V frowned. No, it's not like aristocracy to do this. Aristocrats act in aristocratic ways. He's just a cobbler." Louis V comforted his wife. Don't do this, it will give those newspapers a handle. We already have enough black material. Humph, when my nephew puts us back on the throne of France, we will take resolute action to send all those reporters and newspaper publishers to the guillotine. And the Parliament, the damn Parliament. I've had enough of the Parliament. With my nephew, I fully feel that this is how things should be. Mary said viciously. Also in Schönbrunn Palace, next to the tea room where Mary and Louis V were drinking tea, Franz I was drinking tea with his third brother Archduke Karl. Beulah can't even beat a cobbler. The Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire shook his head. He is really old. Archduke Karl, brother, please send me to Italy. I want to fight with Frost. No, no, no. Franz I shook his head again and again. He looked down on his sickly brother. After all, he was not a time traveler from the future. How could he know that his royal brother was a general who was 55% as good as Napoleon? Franz I said, you'd better stay in Bohemia. That duty is also very important. After all, it is related to how much Polish land we can get. As for Italy, it's very difficult. The letter Beulah wrote to me said that he could organize the defense of the Po River. I think it would be enough to mobilize about 20,000 troops from the country to him. Let this old marshal find his glory in the defense of the Po River. Archduke Karl frowned. Brother, please believe me. My dear brother, of course I believe in your talent, but you see, you are weak and sick, and the climate of Bohemia is better for your condition. Archduke Karl, I heard that the climate in Italy is not bad. Milan not only has a pleasant climate, but also has great Italian food. Franz, let's leave it to Marshal Beulah. If the old general is replaced now, he will always live in the shame of losing to a cobbler. Archduke Karl hesitated and finally remained silent. In Paris, the news arrived later than in Vienna. After all, the journey is long, and the news has to be transferred from Nice, taking a detour. On the day the news reached him, Marat made an impassioned speech in the Parliament, urging Frost to be transferred back to the Rhine front to take charge of the frontal battlefield. However, this proposal was decisively rejected by the Parliament controlled by the Girondists. Then the Parliament anxiously wrote to Dumouriez at the front, asking him to immediately engage in a decisive battle with Austria. Chapter 177 A Chaotic History. After the Battle of Diego, the Austrian army withdrew its defenses at fortresses and passes such as Kharkar. Beulah ordered the Vukshevich division in front of Messina to abandon most of its baggage and retreat to Piacenza, an important stronghold on the Po River. When the French vanguard reached Piacenza, the Austrians had already moved all the boats to the other side of the river and set up camp on the river bank. There were about 10,000 Austrian troops on the other side of the Po River, much fewer than the French. Moreover, the French army had just won a great victory and was in high spirits. Normally, they should have been able to rush over in one go. But the Po River stopped the French army. This river is almost a perfect east-west direction on the plain south of Milan, just cutting the plain in half. The width of the river is 70 to 80 meters at its narrowest point, and the water depth exceeds the depth that can be waded, so it must rely on pontoon bridges or ferries to cross. So the French army could only watch the Austrian army on the other side of the river and could do nothing. There are 3 crossings on the Po River. One is far downstream, and it takes a long detour to make a detour. The other is in Valenza in the territory of the Kingdom of Sardinia upstream. Because the Kingdom of Sardinia did not declare war on France, Ning could not theoretically cross the river through Valenza. Therefore, the Austrian army placed all its troops on the opposite bank of Piacenza, lined up in a row. On May 15, Ning arrived at the south bank of the Po River, and looking at the Austrian army lined up on the opposite side, he could only frown. In the Napoleonic Wars, before the Battle of the Po River, Napoleon first defeated the Kingdom of Sardinia, so he got the opportunity to cross the river in Valenza. He arranged a feint, personally led the main force in Valenza to pretend to cross the river, and at the same time spread the word to the people of the Kingdom of Sardinia, further strengthening the impression that he wanted to cross the river here. Then he sent more than half of the army to detour to Piacenza to cross the river. If the Austrian commander Marshal Beulah had not noticed Napoleon's movements and fled in advance, Napoleon might have completely annihilated the main force of the Austrian corps on the Po River plain. But now, Ning has no space to carry out this operation, because the Kingdom of Sardinia, which controls Valenza, did not participate in the war. The front of the entire battlefield was greatly compressed, and Ning could only cross the river from Piacenza, which was the focus of the enemy's defense. This is not good news. It is too difficult to cross the river and attack, and the Austrians immediately began to build fortifications after retreating to the Po River. Now there is a row of artillery forts in front of Piacenza. Forcing the river to cross will definitely result in heavy losses. And Ning rode a horse on the south bank of the Po River, looking at the sparkling river surface, and was in trouble. Seeing him in such a dilemma, Napoleon suggested, "We can go downstream to cross the river and make a detour." And Ning shook his head. There are several large rivers running north and south on the Po River that divide the plains. These rivers finally merge into the Po River. It is not only a long way to go from the downstream, but also we have to cross many north-south rivers to make a detour. Napoleon curled his lips and suggested, "Then let's change our thinking. In Valenza upstream, the Kingdom of Sardinia has only a small force defending here. We can raid this side and borrow a road." The Austrians certainly didn't think that we would ignore the feelings of the Kingdom of Sardinia and force our way through the territory of the Kingdom of Sardinia. And Ning, what about logistics? Napoleon, the detour troops can only fight with the food and ammunition they carry with them. After quickly defeating the enemy, they will receive supplies from Piacenza. Berthier shook his head as soon as he finished speaking. "This is too risky, and there are diplomatic risks. The Kingdom of Sardinia will have a lot of opinions. Napoleon, let them raise their opinions with Paris. What does it have to do with us?" Berthier was about to object, but Ning spoke up. "Napoleon's suggestion is good. It can quickly defeat the enemy in front of us." "Berthier, General, aren't you worried about diplomacy?" And Ning curled her lips. "The Kingdom of Sardinia is not the Papal States. The Kingdom of Sardinia has its own troops. It has tens of thousands of troops that can fight in the field, and it is very close to the French army's supply line on the Mediterranean coast. If the Kingdom of Sardinia suddenly joins the war and cuts off Ning's supply line, the situation will be bad. In Napoleon's military history, he also conquered the Kingdom of Sardinia first, and then moved to the south of Milan to fight a decisive battle with the Austrian army. What if the Kingdom of Sardinia joins the war before he has dealt with Beulah in the front, and the Kingdom of Sardinia joins the war? Then he will really be attacked from both sides. Of course, there is another solution to that situation, which is to quickly assault Milan and collect supplies in Milan. Yes, just collect supplies, not rob." And Ning thought about it, and asked Berthier, "Can we communicate with the Kingdom of Sardinia first and ask for military passage?" Berthier, "Of course you can, but this requires sending envoys to Turin, the capital of the Kingdom of Sardinia, and negotiating with them. It will probably take more than a month to station on the south bank of the Po River. My suggestion is to take advantage of our current military advantage and force a crossing of the river. The Austrian army has lost most of its heavy artillery and baggage. They must not have much ammunition reserves. As long as they attack for a few days, they will retreat because of the depletion of supplies." And Ning was amazed. Berthier, in your eyes, are our soldiers just numbers in the data? No, we cannot waste the lives of our soldiers in this way. I need to think about how to break through the enemy's Po River defense line as quickly, efficiently and economically as possible. Not long after Ning was stationed in Piacenza, news came from the front line in Paris. Dumouriez defeated the Holy Roman Empire coalition led by Marshal Wurmser on the front line. And Ning was stunned when he got the news. He had been using the situation in 1796 to fit the current situation, so he thought the front line would always be bumpy, and he had to rely on his brilliant achievements in Italy to change the situation. And Ning had thought of the subsequent plot. After he swept through northern Italy, he besieged the Mantua fortress. Austria sent people to rescue the fortress several times in a row, and he won several great victories. In the end, the fortress was breached, and he prepared to advance to Vienna from northern Italy, forcing the Holy Roman Empire to cease fire and return Louis V and Queen Marie, who were hiding in Vienna, to France. As a result, Dumouriez defeated Wurmser on the front line. This script was suddenly wrong. At this time, the Holy Roman Emperor Franz II was also discussing countermeasures with his ministers. Duke Wilhelm, Chancellor of the Holy Roman Empire, said to Francis II, "Your Majesty, our army has suffered a disastrous defeat in northern Italy and the Rhine. The current situation is very bleak. If the French army advances on both fronts, the empire will be dwarfed in terms of military strength. I am afraid that His Royal Highness Karl's corps will have to be mobilized." In addition, the continued defeat has also had a huge impact on the prestige of the empire. I am afraid that it will affect our position on the Polish issue. Franz gritted his teeth. Damn it, how could things in France be so bad? Duke Wilhelm sighed and said, it is France after all. Although the domestic revolution has weakened its strength, a lean camel is bigger than a horse. In fact, Duke Wilhelm's statement is wrong. In fact, the revolution has enhanced France's strength, but as a great noble, he cannot admit such a thing. Franz what should we do now? The most urgent task is to cease fire with France as soon as possible, and then send your aunt and uncle back to France. Will there be no problem? Francis asked. They won't. No, Duke Wilhelm vowed, your uncle has been away from France for so long, and the French have not abolished the king. Instead, they have shown a tendency to support the Duke of Orleans as the new French emperor. This shows that your uncle still has a certain prestige in France. Franz paced back and forth in the room, and finally clapped his hands. Okay, let's do it. I've had enough of my aunt's little tricks in Vienna. I will immediately write to the National Assembly of France to express our sincerity in sending the king back and cease fire. A few days later, the National Assembly in Paris. Brisset of the Girondists was making an impassioned speech on the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, with the successive victories of our army on the front battlefield, especially the brilliant victory of General Dumouriez, the Austrian emperor has kneeled down and asked for peace with us. But should we welcome that king and his Austrian woman back? No, never. He has betrayed France, and we will never welcome back a traitor. Think carefully about that locksmith king and his Austrian woman. They have never done anything good in France. We should have a new king. Objection. Marat slammed the table and stood up. France is now a citizen's France. We should establish a republic. Just like in North America. Brisset, nonsense. The British also established a citizen country during the Glorious Revolution, but they finally chose to welcome back a king. And now, the royalists are still very powerful, especially in rural areas. Everyone still needs a king. For the stability of France, I propose that we should choose an orthodox heir from the existing royal family lineage. Just like the British did after the Glorious Revolution. Fortunately, we now have such a suitable candidate, that is the son of the Grand Duke of Orleans. I propose a vote to enthronize him as Louis VI. Only one update today, the author is going to collect materials. Chapter 178, Monsieur Bonaparte feels his destiny. Ning was facing off with the Austrian army across the river when the news from Paris came. His jaw almost fell to the ground and broke. In the original history, the youngest son of the Grand Duke of Orleans played a role that pitted his father. Literally, someone wanted to make the little guy the new king of France, but failed. The little guy went abroad, and the Jacobins in power sent his father to the guillotine. The Grand Duke of Orleans can be said to be one of the many tragic figures in the French Revolution. He himself was very revolutionary. As a great nobleman, he not only opened his own property for Parisians to visit before the revolution, showing his people-friendly side, but also personally funded many Enlightenment thinkers. He helped publish many pamphlets for citizens, which accelerated the catalysis of the revolution. Then after the convening of the three-level parliament, as a great nobleman, he joined the discussion of the third level very early and stood with the common people. Later, in order to express his revolutionary stance, he even changed his last name to Equality. Yes, in the original history, his last name was Equality. For this reason, he also has a nickname, Mr. Equality. As a result, Mr. Equality, who was eating hot pot, singing songs, and supporting the revolution, was suddenly betrayed by his son. Then, as if the Jacobins had forgotten everything he had done before, they resolutely sent him to the guillotine. It can be said that it was very black humor. And Ning had looked at Christina before and thought about whether to save the Duke. After all, he had received a lot of favors from him, and he might marry his daughter in the future, so he could barely be considered a half-father-in-law. When the time comes, he will be brought from Paris to his own territory, and he can also take over the Duke's coal mines and other assets. Now the main use of coal is still heating in winter. The coal used for steel making is a small matter compared to heating, but the future is the era of the Industrial Revolution. With coal and money, there is the capital for the Industrial Revolution. Of course, and Ning's main purpose is to save people, not to covet the Duke's coal. As a result, and Ning's wishful thinking was made, and suddenly the Duke's son became the King of France. The throne that could not be reached in another time and space, he reached it. The king's father, rounding up, this is the emperor's uncle. Christina was transformed into the king's sister, a princess at best. What kind of magical development is this? The future history is completely unpredictable. As a future person who has read the script, Ning's advantage is that it is completely ruined. But Ning did not have much energy to sigh about this, because another very bad news came from Paris and Vienna. Maybe the two countries will cease fire. It should be a good thing for the two countries. The people don't have to fight anymore and can rest and recuperate, right? But for Ning, this is a big bad thing. He came to Italy to raise money for the future. The wealthy Milan is less than 100 kilometers away. Now he suddenly wants to stop and he will never sleep well in his life. You know, for little Diego, Ning got 5 carriages of silver coins and jewelry valuables. What does Milan have? Ning drools when he thinks about it. He must attack Milan before the ceasefire. Ning called all his think tanks to discuss how to cross the Po River as quickly as possible, kill Bolu, and then rush into Milan to end Austria's rule in northern Italy. After a long discussion, only one method seemed reliable: to attack Valenza by surprise, to take down the guns of the Valenza defenders before the Kingdom of Sardinia could react, and then to cross the river here and bypass Beulah. So on May 20th, Ning made up his mind. No matter what diplomatic issues, Commander Frost didn't want diplomatic issues, he only wanted Milan. Ning's deployment was like this. In order to prevent the Kingdom of Sardinia from suddenly joining the war and interrupting his supply line, Ning placed the former Italian Corps division commanded by Messina on the supply line from Nice to Savona, and then on the front battlefield, he placed the Laharpe division, ready to strengthen the Po River. The Davout division drew away all the heavy infantry artillery, cooperated with Napoleon's cavalry artillery to form a highly mobile flanking force, blitzed Valenza, took down the guns of the Kingdom of Sardinia's troops before they could react, and then crossed the river in Valenza. According to the plan, Davout and Napoleon were to appear on the side of Marshal Beulah in the early morning of the 21st. LaSalle, who also crossed the river via Valenza, rushed to Marshal Beulah's only retreat, the only bridge over the Ada River, the Lodi Bridge. The key to the whole operation is speed, the faster the better. Marshal Beulah's army in front of Ning was only more than 10,000 people, mainly the Vukosevic division. It is said that Marshal Beulah also transferred some troops from the Mantua fortress, but these troops have not arrived yet. Even with Davout's troops, it would be easy to deal with Marshal Beulah's troops. Not to mention that when Davout arrived, Laharpe's troops would really start to force a crossing of the Po River. In the early morning of the 20th, Ning ordered the artillery to open fire. At this time, the artillery units in Ning's hands included all the heavy infantry guns of the Laharpe division and Davout division, and the firepower seemed very fierce. Ning personally directed the shooting, and a large number of enemy fortifications were destroyed in a day of shelling. Marshal Beulah's Austrian army lined up in front all day, and it seemed that the density of artillery fire made him believe that Ning's entire force was on the front, and he was about to use his advantage of more than twice the force to force a crossing of the Po River. At night, Ning used a telescope to see that the Austrian army was reinforcing its defenses overnight. When he saw this scene, Ning knew that he had won. The next morning, Davout's troops appeared on the side of Beulah. Ning ordered the artillery to advance to the Po River, and used artillery fire to prevent Beulah from lining up on the side. Once the formation was formed, it would be penetrated from beginning to end by solid bullets. The Austrian army was defeated without suspense, and did not even have to wait for the Laharpe division to cross the river. It is a pity that Ning sent the cavalry to seize the ferry at Lodi, and failed to capture Marshal Beulah, who ran away alive. When Ning's headquarters followed the Laharpe division to cross the river, the division commander Laharpe had a small accident. Before he boarded the ferry, his foot slipped and he missed a step, his leg got stuck in the gap between the ferry and the dock, and then hit his balls hard, and pulled his hips. So this professional soldier recommended by Berthier had to go back to recuperate, and Ning handed his division to Lannes to command. When crossing the river, Ning suddenly remembered that this Laharpe seemed to have been killed by a stray bullet when crossing Piacenza in real history. The history here has been bullshit to this extent, but he was still seriously injured in Piacenza. Damn, is it also a self-correction of historical changes? In this time and space, if Ning sent Messina to capture Diego, would Messina still be attacked at night when he was looking for the young widow after capturing Diego, and escape in pajamas overnight? On the evening of the 21st, Ning received a message from LaSalle, and he occupied the empty Lodi Bridge almost without a fight. In the original time and space, Napoleon felt his destiny here and felt that he was the chosen one. As a result, in this time and space, The bridge was captured without even a fight. And Ning couldn't help but ask Napoleon how he felt about today's battle. Napoleon said excitedly, "My feeling is that you are simply the symbol of victory. As long as we follow you, we will never lack victory." "And Ning?" "And Ning, you proposed the plan. But when I proposed it, I didn't think it would be so smooth." And Ning curled his lips and decided not to care about it. He changed the subject. "Anyway, Milan is in front of us. Davu, light the torches. Force march tonight, and we will have breakfast in Milan tomorrow." Chapter 179. As a fine luo, Joliu should naturally hang Venice. Whether before or after the time travel, this was Ning's first time in Milan. In the past, his only knowledge of the city came from 2 points. One was the derby between AC Milan and Inter Milan, and the other was his favorite Miyazaki Hayao movie Porco Rosso, in which the red pig's plane broke down and had to be transported to Milan for repair. In that movie, Ning's impression of Milan was that there were many canals and bridges, and the things produced by the factories on the riverside could go directly down the canal. After watching the movie, Ning always wanted to fly a seaplane in Milan, and he had to go through many bridge holes when taking off. It was because of the movie Porco Rosso that Ning always wanted to visit Milan. Unfortunately, after graduating from college, he joined the company and was busy with internal competition every day. If he slacked off for a day, he would be severely surpassed by others, not to mention going on a month-long trip. Going on a trip on a whim is something that only people with financial freedom can do. Social animals can only look forward to Ubisoft's next Assassin's Creed to use the place they want to go as the game stage. Now, Ning stood on the hillside outside Milan in the soft morning light of northern Italy. The city of Mira seemed to be right under his feet. But from this angle, there are no rivers. Strange, is the Milan in Porco Rosso fake? And most of the canals were dug out for transportation after the Industrial Revolution? Ning couldn't help asking the Corsican next to him, "Shouldn't there be many rivers in Milan?" Napoleon replied, "There are indeed many rivers." Ning pointed to Milan in front of him, "Then why can't I see them?" "Just because there are rivers doesn't mean there is water everywhere like Venice." Napoleon shrugged. "Most of the rivers in Milan are canals dug out for transporting goods. The water is deep enough for ships, but not very wide. You can't see them if you stand on a high slope outside the city." Ning said, "Oh." Berthier asked in confusion, "Are you familiar with Milan? Can I ask you to negotiate with the gentry in the city? Our supply line is a bit too long. It would be best if we can find some ways to supplement it in Milan." Ning couldn't help but glance at Berthier. "Just a way to supplement it? Chief of Staff, do you have any misunderstanding about the purpose of my coming to Milan? I came to Milan to complete the primitive accumulation of capitalism. But Milan is not only rich, but also has a large number of engineers and scientists. The industrial level of Italians in this era was quite good. In order to launch the Industrial Revolution in France, the craftsmen in Milan were precious resources." Ning had thought about it. He would first launch a revolution in Milan like the French Revolution, so that Italians could decide Italian affairs themselves. The method of promoting independent bonds that he had used once in Diego could not be used here. He had to change to a more formal method. Ning planned to issue currency directly in Milan as the liberator of Milan. As the first step to issue currency, he would first establish the Italians' own country in Milan, and then he would ban the currency merchants in Milan. This was a kind of merchants who specialized in various currency exchange businesses, most of whom were Jews. After sweeping away the currency merchants, he could hold the right to exchange currency in his hands and open an officially endorsed currency exchange company. Then this company would issue a bill representing a certain weight of gold and silver, stipulating that the bill could be exchanged for silver or gold coins of corresponding value. Because the notes are more convenient to carry than gold and silver coins, and do not require a complex valuation and exchange process, as long as the issuance of notes is controlled and the printing of counterfeit money is strictly prohibited, the notes will soon become popular in trading cities like Milan. After the notes become popular, some more notes can be quietly printed and used for shopping. As long as there is no concentrated run on the bank, the printed notes can be used as money. Ning learned this method of cutting leaks from his teacher in the United States of America, and he plans to put it into practice in Milan. In fact, Ning is like using it in France, but the French are originally resistant to paper and pen. There was a paper currency reform in the kingdom era before, but the result was very bad, which led to the French impression that paper money is unreliable. In addition, The National Assembly is now desperately printing assignats, which has led to the French impression of paper money. The French gradually accepted paper money later, or it was after the Industrial Revolution was completely completed in France. At that time, domestic commodity transactions were too frequent, and using gold coins was too troublesome. Everyone couldn't stand it and accepted paper money. Italy is different. First of all, the banking industry in Italy is well developed, and there is a tradition of using bank deposits as currency. Second, Italy was originally a place where various commercial republics gathered, and commercial activities were frequent, so a trustworthy paper currency was needed. It's just that Italy has been divided for a long time. It was either ruled by the Holy Roman Empire or split into pieces of commercial republics and kingdoms. The scattered republics and kingdoms themselves do not have enough credit to support the promotion of a unified paper currency. Even if it can be accepted in their own country, others will not recognize it outside the country. In fact, if the Holy Roman Empire is willing to issue a paper currency in Italy, with its size and prestige, it can support the acceptance of this paper currency by various countries. But the Holy Roman Empire is a feudal country after all. Although it has become an enlightened feudal system after the reform of Queen Teresa, the feudal system is still a feudal system no matter how enlightened it is. As a result, there is no unified paper currency in Italy until now, which makes the exchange of various currencies very troublesome during the transaction process. It is precisely because of this that there is a living space for Jewish currency merchants. Even in the state of disunity, the Italians still came up with many alternative means to replace the cumbersome currency transaction process with commercial contracts. Ning's idea was that I, the messenger of the French Revolution and the protector of Italian independence, would promote a paper currency that everyone would accept in Italy. With the endorsement of France and Italian independence, this paper currency would definitely be a good deal. It didn't matter if only Milan accepted it at first. Anyway, when the opportunity came, Ning would include the Kingdom of Sardinia, Venice and the Papal States in this paper currency system. It just took him a little time. In any case, everything had to start in Milan. First, he would go to the center of Milan and give a speech, calling on all Italians to stand up. Then he would control all the printing presses in Italy and print slogans of Italian independence all over the streets, telling the Italians that the French liberators were here, and Italy's independence was here. Then, he would hang the governor of the Holy Roman Empire in Milan. Ning said to Napoleon, "Let's go into the city and show the Italians how powerful and majestic the revolutionary citizen army is." Chapter 180, Liberator of Milan, Great Benefactor of Italy. Before the French troops entered the city, they stopped outside the city and Ning mobilized the whole army before entering the city. "We are the liberators of Italy, not the plunderers. We must show our excellent style and do what the military song says, not taking a penny and being polite to others." And Ning rode on his horse and gave a loud speech to the whole army. Many of his troops were formed by the French troops who defected after defeating Lafayette. The military discipline of these troops was not as strong as his original basic troops. These troops would rob, and Diego and Ning dealt with several robbers seriously and enforced military discipline. If possible, Ning wanted to let only the Davout division enter the city. The Davout division was composed of his original troops. After more than a year of training and education, the military discipline must be much better than the incorporated troops. Ning planned to deploy the La Harpe division, now the Lands division, to the direction of the Mantua fortress to monitor the movements of the Austrian army. But the Lands division had been fighting for so many days in a row, and it was unreasonable not to let them enter Milan to rest. So Ning could only try to improve the military discipline of the army through speeches. Although he came to Italy to complete primitive accumulation, his troops could not rob. This felt quite black humor. After finishing the speech, Ning took the lead and began to enter the city. The leading figures in Milan had already received the news, and lined up outside the city to welcome the French army into the city. Many ordinary people in Milan also ran to the outside of the city to watch. From a distance, the large group of people outside the city of Milan made Ning think of the scene of taking office in Goose City and Let the Bullets Fly. All that was missing was a drummer. Ning arranged her female cavalry unit to enter the city first, right behind her staff. This arrangement was because the female cavalry was the French King's Guard ceremonial unit after all. The girls looked very aura and good-looking. Following behind her made her look more impressive. In this way, Ning led a group of female knights to the welcoming Italians. For some reason, many of the Italians who came to greet Ning were fat and had big bellies. When they saw Ning coming, the leader of the fat people stepped forward and shouted loudly, "Long live freedom and equality!" He spoke in French. Perhaps in the eyes of this group of rich Italians, revolutionary France was best known for freedom and equality. Ning responded directly in Italian, "Long live the liberation of Italy!" The Italians looked at each other in confusion, and then the fat man who just shouted "Long live freedom and equality" asked on behalf of everyone, "The liberation of Italy?" Ning, "Yes, we are here for the liberation of Italy. We will support you to free yourself from the rule of the Holy Roman Empire." Ning said all these words in Italian, and the Italians who were watching talked a lot. The big-bellied Italian gentlemen looked at each other in confusion. Suddenly, a young Italian shouted, "Don't we have to pay taxes to France?" Ning, "Of course, from today on, you are citizens of the independent Italian country. You only need to pay taxes to your own government to maintain the operation of your own government. Of course, we will plunder Italy's wealth in a completely new way, a more covert way." Ning did not say this. The Italians were in an uproar. It seemed that they had thought that the French were also here to rule Italy. The fat man who shouted "Long live equality" at the beginning still couldn't believe it. He stepped forward and asked, "So there won't be another governor's palace?" Ning nodded, "Yes, there won't be. But there will be a national assembly, just like the one in Paris, France. Next we will hang the governor of Milan of Shinra, and arrest all those compradors who helped him oppress the Italian people. Hang them." The fat man exclaimed, "Ah!" and looked horrified. At this time, a young man among the Italian crowd shouted, "He is the mayor of Milan of Shinra. He is the accomplice of the governor." They are all. Ning thought, "No wonder you are so fat, so that's how it is." Ning, "Ms. Oliver. I'm here." Ning, "Arrest all these gentlemen. But treat them well. As outsiders, we have no right to deal with them before the Italian court judges them." Ning continued, "Milan will become the Milan of Italians. Free Milan. Italians will have their own government, their own parliament, their own army and police. Before everything gets on track, Free France will supervise all this, maintain order, and fight against the Austrian army." As soon as the voice fell, the Italian independence activists in the crowd shouted, "Long live Italy, long live freedom, long live Free France." The crowd followed this small group of Italian independence activists and shouted. Amid the shouting, Ms. Oliver led the female knights to arrest all the fat gentlemen who welcomed the French army. Ning, "Now, please lead the way. We are going to the governor's palace of the Holy Roman Empire." Someone in the crowd responded, "The governor ran away a long time ago. When the news came that you defeated Marshal Bulla, he ran away." As soon as this person finished speaking, someone in the crowd asked, "Will you hang the nobles? I heard that after the French Revolution, the nobles were hanged." Ning, "Whether we will hang the nobles will be decided by the National Assembly of the Revolutionary Italians. The parliament voted that they should be hanged, and they will be hanged. The Italians will decide everything for themselves." As soon as the voice fell, the citizens of Milan, led by the Italian independence activists, shouted, "Long live freedom and long live France." Then the Italians began to sing a song. This is a song that tells about the oppression of Italy by the Holy Roman Empire and hopes for Italy's independence. This was originally a very sad and angry song, but now it has a sense of joy. Beethoven, who witnessed this scene, exclaimed, "The Italians have welcomed a true hero, a true liberator. Oh, I am so happy for them." What General Frost did in Milan, Italy, was reported back to Paris. Brisset, the Girondist who now controlled the parliament, was so angry that his nose was crooked. He slammed the table in the Girondist club in anger. "What does this Frost want to do? We are still counting on Italian taxes to improve our financial situation. I told you a long time ago that he is a Jacobin. The Jacobins don't want us well." Condorcet said indignantly, "How can he deal with such a big thing as Milan without asking the parliament? He doesn't take the parliament seriously at all. Brisset, we must remove him from his position as commander of the Italian corps and let him return to Paris to pay the price for his actions." Condorcet looked embarrassed. He won the battle after all. It's not appropriate to remove him at this time, right? The Jacobins will definitely take the opportunity to stir up trouble in the newspapers. What is important for us now is to let the new king ascend the throne. We must maintain the stability of Paris. The Jacobins are very prestigious among the trousers men in Paris. What if they don't cooperate and launch a trousers riot? Brisset slammed the table and cursed a few words. At this time, Condorcet said, "Besides, the new king's father, The Grand Duke of Orleans has a good relationship with Frost, so it will be even harder for us to touch him. Brisset, damn it, why did we find such a person to be king? That's because the other people who have the right of succession were either killed or fled abroad. Chapter 181 Jacobin Gentleman. And Ning spent a few comfortable days in Milan. Italian cuisine of this era had already taken shape. After eating Italian cuisine for a few days, Ning immediately abandoned French cuisine, even though French cuisine was recognized as the most advanced cuisine of this era. He always felt that Italian cuisine was more suitable for the Chinese appetite, perhaps because Italian cuisine used rice a lot. In Milan, Ning particularly liked a dish called chicory cream risotto. The rice used in this dish was produced in Italy, which was very plump and round, and was full of cheese and butter, and tasted very smooth and refreshing. Since eating this dish, Ning asked the chef to make it every day. Then because of Ning's great reputation in his own army, the middle and senior officers of the army all started to eat this dish, and then the new dignitaries in Milan also followed the French army to eat it. In fact, the planting area of rice in Italy is not large, so the upper echelon's crazy eating of chicory cream risotto directly caused the price of rice in Milan to soar. Not only did it soar, but it also started to be out of stock, so the French army's procurement person had to sign a contract with the Italian supplier to guarantee the supply of rice to the general. Yes, rice became Italy's first special product, specially supplied to His Excellency the General. After hearing about this, Ning was very surprised, and then he began to eat other dishes. However, after so many years, he finally ate rice, which still made him feel a little homesick. Speaking of which, the motherland is still the Qing dynasty, and the first Opium War will come in another 50 years. If he is in good health by then, maybe he can still travel across the ocean to visit his motherland? But by then, Ning will be over 90 years old, and I don't know if he can still withstand the journey across half the world. In addition to eating rice crazily in Milan, Ning also did several things. The first was to completely control the printing press in Milan, and publish newspapers every day touting himself as the liberator of Italy from France, to build momentum for his future plans. The second was to abolish the currency merchants as planned, open an official currency exchange, and use his huge reputation as an endorsement. Because most of the currency merchants are Jews, the act of abolishing currency merchants is seen by the Italian people as making fun of the Jews. The reaction of the people to this is, well done. Ning deeply felt that anti-Semitism in Europe has a tradition. As for Ning's own conscience, just kidding, Ning is a paradox player. Every paradox player has two solutions when they are short of money. The first is to ask the Pope for a generous donation, and the second is to expel Jewish merchants. There is no psychological burden at all. After all, I have clicked this decision countless times in the game. As the money-making business went smoothly, Ning also relaxed. According to the plan, he sent the Lands Division with paramilitary discipline to the direction of the Mantua fortress to monitor the movements of the Austrians, and the Davao Division with the good military discipline stayed in Milan to maintain order in Milan. Then the Messina Division continued to be placed on its supply line to monitor the Kingdom of Sardinia. The reaction of the Kingdom of Sardinia to Ning's borrowing of the road was no reaction. It may be because after Ning's troops crossed the border, they sent a car of silver coins collected from Diego to the Kingdom of Sardinia. Everything is fine with the money. Of course, it is also possible that the Kingdom of Sardinia went to Paris to protest, and Ning didn't know. Anyway, Ning's principle is that what happened in Paris has nothing to do with me. Let the gentlemen in Paris worry about it. During the time Ning was in Milan, a new king ascended the throne in Paris. When the news of the ascension came, Ning was drinking tea with Christina, so Ning jokingly called Christian royal sister. Christina laughed so hard. In July, the news of the armistice finally came. The Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of France signed an armistice treaty. Originally, Ning thought that the gentlemen in Paris would trip him up and return Milan to the Holy Roman Empire, but the gentlemen in Paris were quite competitive and asked Milan to maintain the status quo in the armistice agreement. The Holy Roman Empire probably missed Poland, so it accepted it with a pinch of its nose. If you think about it carefully, it may be because Ning only occupied Milan, and more than half of northern Italy was still in the hands of the Holy Roman Empire, so the Holy Roman Empire was not particularly painful. If Ning took away the fortress of Mantua as in another period of history, and ate up all of northern Italy, the Holy Roman Empire would probably not be able to remain calm. After the armistice, Ning didn't know how history would go. He decided to stay the same in the face of change and develop himself first. In Milan, he established the Republic of Milan, used his reputation to endorse, controlled the Republic's right to issue currency, and began to print banknotes openly, relying on this to grab a lot of wealth. He also recruited Italian craftsmen and scientists to tinker with steam engines, preparing to promote the Industrial Revolution in southern France and northern Italy. As long as the Industrial Revolution is launched, with the strength of the Industrial Revolution as a foundation, no matter what direction history will develop in the future, he will have the strength to deal with it, right? And Ning also organized a Republican army in the Republic of Milan. He asked the tailor he found personally to design uniforms for the Republican army. According to his requirements, the uniforms were mainly red. Napoleon was very confused about this. Should it be blue? I thought that the Free Army should basically be blue as the main color. And Ning shook his head. No, 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 you don't understand. The main force of the Republican Army is Italians. Do you understand? Italians have to wear red to be combat effective. Napoleon, this. And Ning shook his head and smiled without saying a word. After all, the Italian Redwood Army is a matter of decades later, and it is useless to talk about it now, so let everyone treat it as their special hobby. Then time came to the end of 1792, and Paris changed again. In fact, economic problems still exist in France today, and most people are not living well. So in October 1792, another revolution broke out in Paris. The Girondists were overthrown by the armed Parisian masses, and the masses also rushed into the Tuileries Palace, demanding that the king sign an order to dissolve the parliament. The new king had no choice but to do so, so the Girondists who supported the king completely fell. And Ning was shocked to hear the news. He thought that the rule of the Girondists would be stable for a while and would not fall as quickly as in real history. As a result, after a circle of history, it returned to the original track. It seems that the fundamental reason for the fall of the Girondists in the original history was that domestic problems had not been resolved, and the loss of the war was just a catalyst. After the fall of the Girondists, the new National Assembly was quickly elected, and the Jacobin Club occupied the majority of seats in the parliament. Yes, the Jacobin, he actually came to power. Chapter 182 Saying Goodbye to Poland. 1792, Lazar Carnot, the general manager of Ning in China, arrived in Milan. Ning and his generals welcomed Carnot, and after a brief greeting, everyone went to Ning's study. Lazar Carnot looked up at Ning's study and praised, "The decoration of this study is so luxurious." Ning, the house originally belonged to the most powerful nobleman in Milan, but he was sent to the lamppost by the Milanese, so I took over the house. Lazar Carnot, really? I saw a green tricolor flag in Milan. That's the tricolor flag designed by Andy for the Italians. Napoleon replied, in order to distinguish it from a red, blue and white, it was changed to green, red and white. Ning, I think blue and green can represent the same meaning. Besides, the flag of the Duchy of Milan is green. Lazar Carnot looked at Ning. You hanged the Archduke, and you used the color of the Grand Duchy. It wasn't the Archduke I hanged, but the ordinary people of Milan. The local Italian independence elements seemed to have determined that the nobles who colluded with the Holy Roman Empire were traitors, so they hanged them happily. Of course, they also divided up the nobles' property. Ning spread his hands. The French army did not participate in the Milanese's action of dividing up the nobles' property, because Ning planned to complete his harvest in other ways. However, the French army occupied almost all the houses that the Milanese had robbed and used them as barracks. The house where Ning lives now is the largest one. After everyone talked about the situation in Milan for a few more words, Ning coughed and looked at Lazar Carnot seriously. So, what's going on in the country? I thought the rule of the Girondists would be stable for a while. Ning remembered that the reason why the Girondists in real history fell was because they advocated foreign wars, and then the war was lost. France was in danger, so the angry people launched a new revolution and killed the Girondists. The war has stopped. Why would the Girondists be killed? Lazar Carnot sighed. It's because after the new king ascended the throne, those hidden old forces gathered around the king again. The king has rejected several bills aimed at alleviating the domestic economic situation in succession because these bills will further weaken the financial strength of the great nobles. At the same time, the Girondists were also using their power to make a lot of money, which resulted in soaring prices in Paris. Ning raised his eyebrows. So the lives of the trouser-wearing guys in Paris still didn't get better. Yes, and then a large number of newspapers, led by Marat's Friends of the People, were advocating that it was the enemies of France who were secretly sabotaging everything, which led to everyone's miserable lives, and finally Paris rioted. Lazare Carnot shrugged. Napoleon smiled and said, "It seems that Andy has pointed out a clear path for the French in Paris. They are increasingly inclined to stand up and kill the culprits who made their lives worse. And Ning, does this have anything to do with me? Napoleon, you set a good example for them." And Ning thought to herself, "Don't be like this. I wanted to check in and sightsee on the day of the Bastille. Who knew they carried me in?" Lazare Carnot brought the topic back to the original path. "In short, now that the general's friends are in power in Paris, they have sent me several letters and asked me to pass them on to you. I brought them all." Lazare Carnot took out a few letters from his bag and placed them on Ning's desk. And Ning took them and saw that they were sent to him by Marat, Robespierre and Danton. He now has someone in Paris. There is no war outside France now. Although there is still the problem of national division caused by the clergy law inside, the internal environment of the Jacobins is much better than the situation faced in real history. In real history, the Jacobins were forced to adopt a policy of terror because the internal and external situations were very dangerous. The Jacobins of today should not be so thorough. Just as Ning was thinking this, Lazare Carnot said, "Your Excellency, the general's friends seem to be eagerly looking forward to your return to Paris, but I don't recommend this. The situation in Paris is very dangerous." And Ning frowned. "Why is it dangerous again?" Lazare Carnot, "The situation in the south is relatively stable because of the reforms led by you, Your Excellency the General, but the north of France is a mess. The Girondists' poor economic policies have greatly increased the power of the Royalists. The Girondists have also supported a new king, who now has the tendency to unify the entire Royalist party. Although Your Excellency the General's friends have driven away the Girondists, they can't do anything about the Royalists. Now some people are advocating that the new king abolish the clergy law and try those priests who swear allegiance to the National Assembly instead of the Pope. This momentum has intensified after the Pope issued a new instruction. The new instruction that Lazare Carnot was talking about was the Pope's statement on the clergy law in September, in which the Pope made it clear that the French clergy law was contrary to the will of the Lord. The Pope had previously maintained a very ambiguous silence on the situation in France, but in September he finally broke his silence. This led to the hardening of the oath-rejecting clergy in France. After all, their refusal to swear allegiance to the National Assembly was endorsed by the Pope. As a result, the contradiction between the two groups of clergy became unprecedentedly acute. As a Chinese, Ning found it difficult to understand how serious this contradiction was. After all, China has always been a secular regime, and secular regimes have destroyed Buddhism more than once in history. But France is different. Although people say that France is a filial son of God all day long, this is all ridicule. In fact, France is a Catholic country, and in rural France, because the French nobles have flocked to the city in the past 100 years, the daily life of the vast rural areas is basically organized by the local parish priests, and the influence of priests in rural areas is very huge. The split of Catholic clergy actually represents the split of the entire country. The refusal priests who had been endorsed by the Pope were uniting with the conservative forces gathered under the name of the new king, forming a very powerful force in France that was trying to return things to the situation before the Revolution of 1789. After Carnot's explanation, Ning finally understood how complicated the current situation in France was. The Jacobins killed the Girondists, and now they are about to face the attack of the conservative forces. Paris is now a melting pot on dire straits. Ning was shocked. Damn it, how could things in Paris be so bad? Napoleon, why don't we lead the Italian corps and return to the court? Thoroughly purge the old forces in Paris. By the way, give everyone a promotion. You see, Davout commanded a division, but he is still a captain. Ning thought about this possibility. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. Ning, come in. A servant entered the room. Newspapers from Vienna. Ning, okay, give it to me. The attendant handed the newspaper to Ning. Ning unfolded the newspaper, and all his officers gathered around and stood behind him to read the contents of the newspaper. Ning, why are you gathered here? You can't read German. LaSalle, we can look at the pictures. Come on, tell us if there is any news worthy of our attention. Ning sighed. The Russian army marched straight in and captured Warsaw. Soon there will be no Poland in this world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183. The European troublemaker finally takes action. And Ning remembered that Poland was divided 3 times in history, and the Russian occupation of Warsaw should be the 2nd time. Then, in order to resist the fate of their impending demise, the Poles launched an uprising against Russia, which led to the 3rd partition. After that, there was no Poland in the world anymore. It is also a pity that Poland was once so powerful and the Polish winged hussars were so glorious, but in the end they ended up like this. Although the division of Poland has not yet ended and Poland still has some scattered plots of land, Russia, Prussia and Austria have already eaten up the core areas of Poland and met most of their territorial needs. I am afraid that Austria can devote its energy to dealing with France next. Although France and Austria have just signed an armistice agreement, the armistice agreement in the real world is not like the 10-year term in the game. There are a series of penalties for tearing up the armistice agreement in the game, but there are none in reality. In real history, France also ceased war with Austria several times and then went to war again. Ning, the partition of Poland is over, the Austrians may come to deal with us. Napoleon clapped his hands vigorously. Isn't that even better? I haven't fought them enough. Berthier, now some gentlemen in Milan are beginning to think we are a nuisance, and external pressure will help shut them up. LaSalle, let them come, my cavalry will continue to defeat them on the plains, just like we did in Diego. Ning, don't be impatient. Don't be impatient. We are not sure whether the Austrians will turn around to deal with us. Vienna, Schönbrunn Palace. Franz I looked at the British envoy in front of him. You mean, Prussia also wants to go to war with France? Yes, because Prussia's demands for most of Poland's territory have been met. If you go to war with France, you will get assistance from Prussia this time. Franz I, why is it a British envoy who tells me this? Because this is the result of our country's mediation. The British envoy said proudly. In addition, our country also mediated with the Kingdom of Sardinia. The kingdom has always been resentful of the last time the French forcibly passed through its territory. If you go to war with France, you will get strong support from the Kingdom of Sardinia in the direction of Italy. Franz I curled his lips. You bunch of crows, just want to watch the countries on the European continent fight each other. The British envoy smiled and said, no matter what our plans are for now, don't you feel bad about losing Milan's taxes? Franz curled his lips. Of course I feel bad. If Russia had occupied Warsaw earlier and settled the matter of dividing Poland, I wouldn't even have a ceasefire with them. The British envoy, you can continue the war now. After all, you still have a legitimate French king. You can angrily denounce the new king appointed by the French as illegitimate, and then send your relatives back to the throne of France. Franz I touched his lips, and the huge emerald on his finger reflected the sunlight. The British envoy, Milan is the most dazzling gem on your crown, just like India is the crown of Britain. The Holy Roman Emperor turned his head and looked at his chancellor. So what do you think? The chancellor replied, the empire was built for Poland before, and it retained its strength to balance Tsarist Russia and Prussia. Now there are only a few small places left in Poland, and Prussia is willing to send troops with us. I think this opportunity cannot be missed, Your Majesty. Look, we can transfer His Highness Karl's court to the Rhine region, and then transfer all of Marshal Wurmser's troops to Italy. According to our intelligence, the field strength of the French army in Italy is only 30,000. We will mobilize Marshal Wurmser's 50,000 troops, plus the 50,000 troops of the Kingdom of Sardinia, a total of 100,000. The Chancellor said as he gestured on the map with a stick. Franz I was still worried. Who will command the Rhine line? Karl? No, my sickly brother is not suitable for fighting. The Chancellor, it can be handed over to Blücher of Prussia, an experienced general. Franz I thought for a few seconds and nodded vigorously. Very good, let's do it. Although it seems like it is being used by Britain, but, yes, Milan is a pearl that I cannot lose. I will summon Wurmser and give him instructions in person. After that, Franz I turned to the British envoy. Go back and tell your Prime Minister Pitt that his wishful thinking has come true this time. I thank you for your help in connecting. Ever since France had a new king, Louis V's life has been very comfortable. Most of the conservatives who had gathered around him ran back to France to lick the new French king, and his Queen Marie, who had been talking about going back to Paris all day, seemed to be depressed and stayed in the bedroom without coming out. It is said that the Queen's Swedish lover has been accompanying her in the bedroom. If it were a Chinese, they would definitely be furious about being cuckolded, but in France, this kind of lover thing is very common. Louis V did not think there was anything wrong with it. On the contrary, he felt that he was relaxed with his Swedish lover coaxing the Queen, and he could play with his locks to his heart's content. On this day, Louis V was playing with a newest double-headed lock, and he was having a lot of fun when the door was opened. Louis V was still very angry. Although he was no longer the King of France, as a former king, he still could not tolerate servants entering the door without knocking. He raised his head angrily and saw Queen Marie's chest muscles occupying his field of vision. "Oh," said Louis V. Oh my God, it's you, I thought." Queen Marie said happily, "My dear, have you heard? France is going to declare war on France again." Louis V. "What? It's been less than half a year since the armistice." "Yes, it's great. This time there are also Prussia and the Kingdom of Sardinia. It is said that Britain will also get involved. France is finished." Louis V. "Oh, I am still a Frenchman after all. Can you not say that France is finished so happily in front of me?" Queen Marie, "Then let me put it another way. That annoying National Assembly is finished. And the fake king supported by the Parliament, they are all finished. We are going home." Louis V glanced at the lock on his hand, with an expression that he felt that life in Schönbrunn Palace was not bad. Queen Marie stuck to Louis V and asked softly, "Aren't you happy, dear? Seeing that those who snatched your throne are about to end, aren't you happy?" Louis V. I'm happy, of course I'm happy. Great, haha, I can go back home, haha." Louis V put down the lock in his hand and laughed awkwardly. Queen Marie was very happy. She hugged her husband, then stood up and walked back and forth in the room excitedly, saying excitedly as she walked, "We are going home. Home. I can't wait to hang those annoying people." Chapter 184 Mr. Prosperous from Paris. While the world situation was changing, and Ning was also actively preparing. This time, Laser Cano came to Milan to personally escort the factory's new products. This is a new rifle with rifling after the production process was improved. On the basis of the breech-loading rifle sent from the UK, rifling inside the barrel was added. In this era, there were already rifles with rifling, but the firing rate of muzzle-loading rifles was too slow. Because in order to play the effect of rifling, the bullet must fit tightly against the inner wall of the barrel, which makes it very troublesome to load a muzzle-loading rifle. In order to put the bullet in, you have to use a hammer to knock the rod, and drive the rod into the barrel like a nail, so that the bullet can be pressed to the bottom of the barrel. Therefore, the firing rate of this muzzle-loading rifle is only 1/10 of that of an ordinary smoothbore rifle, and loading is particularly laborious. Hammering the rod is a standard labor-intensive job. In addition, rifle guns are difficult to produce. There were no machine tools in this era, so the rifling inside the barrel was hand-planed, which was very time-consuming to produce. Because of this limitation, when Ning set out for Italy, the troops were not equipped with many breech-loading guns, nor did they bring rifles with multiple lines. Everyone was holding a conventional smoothbore gun. However, Ning assigned a task to Laser Cano, who stayed at home, and asked him to urge the craftsmen under him to study the manual machine tools that could conveniently and quickly plan rifling, and to improve the design of breech-loading guns, enhance productivity, and use the assembly line that Ning had tinkered with. Laser Cano came this time with the results of Ning's instructions. Yes, after 2 years of tinkering, Ning finally had the first batch of 500 breech-loading rifles. The combination of breech-loading guns and rifled guns can perfectly solve the problem that the previous muzzle-loading rifles were too slow to load. After all, when loading from the back, there is no need to let the bullet pass through the barrel with rifling. Just put the bullet directly on the butt of the barrel from the back. The rest can be left to the gunpowder. Such a weapon with long range, high accuracy and high firing rate was born. The only problem with this gun is that it is too complicated to produce, and the output is really worrying. Ning still adopted the assembly line method, which greatly improved the production efficiency to obtain the production capacity. It took so long to make only 500 guns. In addition, the cost is not to mention. The money to make one gun can make more than 10 smoothbore guns. If it weren't for Ning, a time traveler, who tried his best to promote the practical application of this thing. This thing would definitely replace the smoothbore gun on a large scale when the productivity developed to the point where it could be mass-produced like cabbage. As a time traveler, Ning used his own strength to advance the practical application of this technology in the army. After Laser Cano brought these 500 guns to Milan, Ning was very happy to test them in the suburbs of Milan and found that all the indicators of this thing were satisfactory. The officers under Ning had different reactions to this new rifle. Napoleon firmly supported the use of this new technology. Lasalle believed that this new rifle was just a bonus and that his cavalry could win the war. Davout expressed cautious optimism, while Berthier believed that this weapon would not have any substantial effect except for increasing the consumption of ammunition. But Ning ignored the opinions of the officers. He immediately decided to form a company of sharpshooters, selected 250 soldiers from hunters, and each of them was equipped with a new rifle, and the remaining 250 rifles were used as backup. Ning was very much looking forward to the performance of this company of sharpshooters in the next war, and went to see them practice using the new rifle every day. His officers were more concerned about the 10,000 fresh troops brought by Lazzarcano. These fresh troops were recruited with the wealth that Ning plundered from Italy, and they were all progressive young people who supported the revolution. The courage and morale of the army composed of progressive youth in battle have been widely recognized by officers, and some even believe that these fresh troops can match the 20,000-strong dynasty army. However, the total number of troops in Ning's hands was still far lower than the enemy force he would face after the war. For this reason, Ning took the action of forming a large number of Italian Redwood Army. He planned to use the Redwood Army to defend various passes and be responsible for logistics and transportation, and to concentrate all the French troops for field battles. Of course, the French troops must also guard the strongholds along the line from Nice to Savona. After all, this is the lifeline of communication with the country. Excluding the troops guarding these places, the French army can have more than 40,000 field troops. The French army faced the Austrian and Sardinian armies with a total of 100,000 troops. Fortunately, because the French troops often defeated the larger forces with fewer troops, the soldiers did not take this difference in strength seriously, and their morale was very high, as if General Frost could destroy the enemy forces that far outnumbered them with just a wave of his hand. At the end of November, the latest order came from Paris. The newly elected National Assembly controlled by the Jacobins promoted all the officers under Ning. Davout and Berthier both received the rank of Major General. Laharpe, who was recuperating from illness, received the rank of Colonel at Lands. Messina, who had been reorganizing the original Italian corps troops in the rear, was also promoted to colonel. The only one who was dissatisfied with the promotion result was Lasalle. This young hussar only received the rank of lieutenant colonel, and he complained about it. Lasalle, why am I one level higher than Lands? Just because I only commanded a cavalry brigade? Lands was promoted to acting division commander because Laharpe fell down. In order to appease this general under his command, Ning could only ask the painter David to draw a picture for him, called General Lasalle Charges to the Enemy in Diego, which mainly depicts his great achievements in Diego. A week later, the painting was finished and sent to Lasalle's barracks, along with a Dorman coat that Ning specially found the most expensive tailor in Milan to make for Lasalle. The coat was sewn with more lace than the ordinary Dorman coat with gold thread. Hussars generally love beauty. When Lasalle saw this beautiful coat, he liked it so much that he finally stopped talking about the rank. There was another person who came from Paris with a promotion order. In theory, Ning didn't know this person, but Ning knew him because he was also a famous person in the original history. This person was prosperous, yes, the special commissioner who appointed Napoleon as the commander-in-chief of the Toula artillery in the original history, prosperous. In the original history, this person was also the lover of Napoleon's wife Josephine and cheated on Napoleon. Chapter 185 Paris Needs You. On the day when Paris arrived in Milan, Ning found that Napoleon was actually wearing a green hat. Ning couldn't help asking, "Napoleon, why are you wearing such a hat?" Napoleon smiled and said, "Miss Melody chose it for me. How about it? I like it very much." Ning, "Miss Melody, is she the socialite in Milan?" "Yes, she is the protagonist of all salons and balls." Napoleon didn't dislike Ning's statement at all, but seemed to be boasting, "I wrote a love novel for her. I will show it to you when it's finished." It appeared, Napoleon's love novel. In the original history, everyone suspected that the heroine of this book was Josephine, the owner of Malmaison Castle. Now I'm afraid that this protagonist will become a socialite in Milan. Josephine is also a socialite. She made Napoleon wear more than one green hat. Does Napoleon like to associate with fickle women? However, it seems that it is normal for women to wear green hats for their husbands in this era, especially aristocratic women. When Ning read the biography of Napoleon, he always felt that the upper class of this era had a prominent circle of nobility, which was really chaotic. This is also the reason why Ning has not married after traveling through time for so long. As a Chinese, he is still more resistant to wearing a green hat. In this chaotic era, after marrying a wife, he went out to fight for a few years, and when he came back, his son was 1 month old. How disgusting. But as a 24-year-old young man, Napoleon was still full of longing for love, but in history he should have fallen in love with Josephine, the widow of Malmaison Castle. Napoleon in this time and space has not even been to Paris a few times. After returning from Corsica, he has been following Ning to fight everywhere. This time he entered Milan, which should be the first time that Napoleon has lived in a big city for more than half a year since he returned from Corsica. So it is very normal for him to fall in love in Milan. Ning looked at Napoleon wearing a green hat with a very complicated look. The reason why Miss Melody chose a green hat was probably because green was the color of the Milan emblem. She used this way to show that Napoleon was pursuing a Milanese girl. But to Ning, a Chinese, the green color has a profound meaning. Especially now that Paul Barras has come from Paris, looking at Mr. Barras and then looking at Napoleon's green hat, and Ning feels a kind of fate that transcends time and space. Barras dismounted, strode forward and extended his hand to Ning. "General Frost, I have heard of your name for a long time." And Ning shook Barras' hand. "Hello, it's strange that I have been in Paris for a while, but I have never met you. Because I hadn't joined the Jacobin Club at that time." Barras replied, "After I entered the club, I have been hearing about your legend. Mr. Marat, Mr. Robespierre and Mr. Danton all praised you." And Ning smiled and said, "They're all my old friends." "How are they?" Barras, "Of course, very well. Mr. Robespierre and Mr. Danton hold high positions and power in the new parliament, and restricted by the rule that members of parliament cannot be re-elected. Although Mr. Marat no longer has a position in parliament, he is active every day in the Friends of the People newspaper, criticizing the newspapers founded by Brisset and others." And Ning couldn't help but frown. After the Jacobins brought someone down, they didn't even cut the grass and root it out. Is this still like the Jacobins? Sure enough, the current situation is not that dangerous, so the Jacobins did not implement a policy of terror as they did in real history. Barras said again, "Mr. Robespierre sent me as a special envoy to persuade you to return to Paris to preside over military affairs." And Ning, "I can't go back. You should know that in this war, the Italian Corps may have to face the army of the Kingdom of Sardinia and the army of the Holy Roman Empire at the same time. The enemy's strength is more than twice ours." As soon as the voice fell, LaSalle interrupted and said, "We have been fighting more than twice the enemy, nevertheless, and we are almost used to it. But if you change someone else, they will definitely not be able to do it." And Ning nodded, "That's the case, so no, I can't leave Milan. I believe Paris will be fine. After all, Paris has more soldiers than us." When Ning said this, he suddenly thought of something. In history, Paris had a steady supply of soldiers because there was a Lazare Carnot who carried out military reforms in Paris and continuously converted revolutionary citizens into the French army. So the French army relied on its superiority in manpower to defeat the enemy. The first few victories of the French Revolution were all because there were too many revolutionary troops. That's why Lazare Carnot got the nickname the Organizer of Victory. Now Lazare Carnot is under Ning, and the area he is responsible for has also changed to southern France. To be more specific, the territories of the former Kingdom of Aquitaine and the Grand Duchy of Provence, which are not on the same circle as Paris. Is Paris going to be in trouble this time? No, not really. It's just that there is no Lazare Carnot, and history will not change so much. Ning waved away the worries in his mind and said to Barras again firmly, "I will not go back to Paris. I want to share the fate of my soldiers. I brought them to Italy, and I have the obligation to lead them to a glorious victory in Italy." While Ning said this, Beethoven next to him took a pen and scribbled in the shorthand book, and the painter David next to him nodded repeatedly. The first thing these two people did when they arrived in Milan was to publish a record of General Frost's words and deeds, and publicize the general's greatness and justice to everyone. and Ning was too lazy to care. After hearing Ning's statement, Barris suddenly frowned and looked at Ning seriously. "General, are you a royalist or a patriot?" Ning looked around. At this time, many Milanese citizens were watching General Frost welcome the guests, so he said, "Go into the house first, and then I will tell you." Then Ning made a gesture of invitation. Barris nodded. A moment later, everyone entered Ning's study. The study was filled with incense from India, and it was filled with refreshing freshness. A huge globe occupied the space on the side of the desk. When Ning passed by the stove, he picked up the fire tongs and fiddled with the charcoal inside to make the flames rise higher. Then he took off his coat and handed it to Fanny, saying to the guest from Paris, "Of course I am a patriot." Barris said seriously, "But some gentlemen in Paris seem to think that you are a royalist. After all, you have such a good relationship with the Grand Duke of Orleans, and his daughter is in your army." Ning, "It's just a personal relationship, and it doesn't affect my position." Barris, "But when I passed Nice, I saw the black robes and white flags of the royalists everywhere." Ning curled his lips. Nice was originally a place where the royalists were very powerful. It should be said that the royalists in the whole southern France were quite strong. It was just that Ning's previous actions of suppressing rebellions and dividing land weakened the power of the royalists. In addition, France is still a kingdom now, so the royalists did not stir up any waves. In real history, the entire southern France launched a royalist rebellion, and it was Paul Barras in front of him who conquered Nice occupied by the royalists and established a maritime province of the Republic. Ning said to Paul Barras seriously, "You can rest assured that the royalists in the south will not cause any trouble. The reason why I only let Lazare Carnot bring 10,000 people here is because I am worried about changes in the south." Yes, with Lazare Carnot's talent, how could he only organize such a small force for such a long time? Ning left a large number of troops in southern France in order to suppress the royalist rebellion when necessary. He leaned forward and asked Barris very seriously, "It seems that the situation in Paris is very complicated." Barris nodded, "The royalists are ready to move. Many people suspect that they intend to use the opportunity of the Holy Roman Empire and Prussia to go to war with us to restore the royal power. The whole of Paris is suspicious of each other. Mr. Marat is advocating the hanging of all the royalists, saying that every royalist is a potential traitor, and the royalists are also tit for tat. It is conceivable that once we fail on the battlefield, even if it is just a small failure, the whole of Paris will be in a bloody storm." Ning, "That's why you are in a hurry to transfer me back." Barris nodded, "You are right, we need your military talent now. Paris needs you." Ning shook his head repeatedly, "No, if the situation in Paris changes, I will let Lazare Carnot send the army he has trained for a long time to support Paris. But I will not go back, I want to stay here, with my soldiers." Chapter 186, Tricky. After arranging Barris to stay in the most luxurious hotel in Milan, Ning and his officers gathered in Ning's study to discuss the latest domestic intelligence brought back by Barris. Napoleon spoke first. "It seems that the domestic situation is more complicated than imagined. Why don't we give up Italy and go back to Paris, like Cromwell?" Ning was about to answer, and Lazare Carnot asked, "So when the country is unstable, do we stand on the royal party or the Republican side?" Everyone looked at Lazare Carnot. In fact, when Ning was chatting with the officers, he more or less talked about his future plans and his position, so the officers who had been following him in the war knew his inclination. Especially Napoleon. Ning has always been a hardcore Republican since the Brienne era. But Lazare Carnot has been engaged in construction in the rear for a long time, and basically only has correspondence with Ning, and the letters are basically about business, without expressing any opinions on politics, so it is normal that he does not know Ning's inclination. Ning, "Of course it's a republic. I'm just a leatherworker, and the royalists don't necessarily want me." The officers all laughed. Lazare Carnot said quite unexpectedly, "But the current King Louis VI is the son of your sponsor, right? I heard that you may also become the king's uncle." The royalists gathered in Nice and Toulon seemed to think so. They even regarded our army as a hardcore royalist force during the discussion. Ning, "That's their illusion. I do have a good personal relationship with His Excellency the Duke, but that doesn't involve principles. I firmly believe that everyone is equal and want to establish a civilian society. I am naturally in conflict with the royalists." When Ning said this, he suddenly had an idea. "Damn, what if these people force me to the throne in the future? It won't be that bad. Forget it. Emphasizing this now can also be regarded as eliminating this possibility. LaSalle, I propose that we drink a toast to the Republic. And Ning, you just want to find an opportunity to drink. LaSalle, good wine, women, and killing enemies on the battlefield, aren't these three things a man should desire? Napoleon laughed and said, that's all you can do. Yes, yes, unlike you, your dream must be to put a cannon in the face of the enemy general and fire it. LaSalle retorted. Napoleon, if I can do it, I will definitely do it. Don't let your cavalry fall behind my cannon by then. Oh, look, who is bragging? It seems that Napoleon and LaSalle are insulting each other, but they all have smiles on their faces. And Ning glanced at Napoleon and LaSalle. He didn't know that Napoleon and LaSalle had a good relationship to the point of insulting each other. It seems that after several wars, the officers under his command have also established a deep friendship with each other. Maybe there will be no more things like friendly forces being unmoved in the future, right? While Napoleon and LaSalle were joking with each other, Lazare Carnot was worried about the domestic situation. Since we want to support the Republic, the domestic situation may be a bit bad, because there are really many royalists in the south. Maybe, we must be prepared. After the Parliament and the royalists split, I estimate that there will be more than 200,000 royalists in the south who will rebel. And Ning frowned. Is that so many? This is just a conservative estimate. And Ning curled her lips. If you think about it carefully, in the past history, even in Paris, which was the general base of the revolutionaries, the royalists also launched a massive riot, and in the end, it was Napoleon who bombarded the royalists with grape shot on the streets to suppress it. Lazare Carnot stroked his beard, muttering to himself as he thought, I have to send those who are royalist-leaning in the army to Italy as soon as possible, and then ensure that enough Republican troops are stationed in the south, ready to suppress the royalists at any time. Napoleon, don't worry, just pull the cannons to the streets, load them with grape shot, and bombard them hard. Both the royalists and the old nobles will soon collapse. LaSalle jokingly said, come on, as if grape shot can solve all problems. Davu, in fact, even if we don't use cannons, a mere mob can be dealt with bayonets and neat formations. I am willing to take 3,000 troops back to suppress the rebellion. And Ning, no, you can't leave. No general on the front line can leave. We still have to fight against Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia. Lazare Carnot, General, you stay in Italy and concentrate on dealing with the enemy. I will take care of domestic affairs. And Ning, then I'll leave it to you. If you really lack troops, you can recruit soldiers from the peasants who have obtained the land and tell them that this is to protect everything they have already gained. Laser Carnot nodded. Davu, let's discuss how to defeat Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia. According to our cavalry's reconnaissance and the intelligence we got from Italian merchants, the strength of the Mantua fortress has been greatly increased, and to the north of the fortress, there are obvious signs of troop increases in the Trent and Bassano directions. The Austrian army is expanding its warehouses, obviously in preparation for supplying a larger army. Davu gestured on the map. And Ning looked at the map, so the Austrian army may attack from the Adige River and the Brenta River. Davu, in terms of supply, the Adige River Valley in the direction of Trent is closer to the supply center of Shinra, and Bassano obviously has to take a detour. And Ning, Adige River Valley. And Ning remembered this valley. In real history, Napoleon defeated the main force of the Austrian army in a place called Rivoli in the Adige River Valley. Although Austria made a breakthrough in the southeast of Verona and crossed the French defense line, it was eventually blocked by the French army that surrounded the Mantua fortress. In the end, the fortress surrendered, and the Holy Roman Army retreated to the Alps, handing over the fertile, broad and rich land at the foot of the mountain to Napoleon. In real history, Napoleon defeated the Austrian army twice in the area north of the Mantua fortress, and completely took over the entire northern Italy except Venice. Then Napoleon also defeated the Papal States by the way, and the Pope generously donated money once. And Ning will face the armies of the Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of Sardinia on this land. The good news is that Ning is very familiar with the process of Napoleon's several victories north of Mantua, and he also has a clear idea of the entire terrain. The bad news is that Ning did not have the time difference to first drive away Austria, then kill the Kingdom of Sardinia, and finally concentrate on dealing with Austria like Napoleon did. This time he has to face Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia at the same time. Chapter 187. Say hello to Maximilian for me. After a day's rest, Mr. Barras came to beg Ning to return to Paris again. Ning did not refuse, and directly told him the military intelligence of Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia that he had scouted in person, and then asked in return, "Tell me, who can replace me to command the Italian corps?" Barras was silent. In his impression, Barras's military ability was actually quite good. After all, he was the one who quelled the rebellion in Nice and other places, established a maritime province, and later discovered Napoleon's achievements. But it was basically impossible for Barras to suddenly become a person who could hold up the Kingdom of Sardinia and the Holy Roman Empire in Italy. Sure enough, Barras hesitated for a long time, but couldn't come up with a reason. Suddenly an idea struck him, and he asked, "Then can General Frost find a way to deal with enemies that are twice as many as ours?" And Ning glanced at his subordinates, and then Napoleon kindly reminded them, "It's just fighting an enemy that is 3 times as large as ours. We tried it in Cantaï and won a great victory. We even chopped off the head of the surrendered enemy general." Barras, this. And Ning, although there are many enemies, they are divided into 2 battlefields. Our army also occupies several obstacles in the mountains. The Messina division defending these obstacles has 10,000 people. It should be able to hinder the Sardinian army for a long time. During this period, we have to defeat the Austrian army in the front and force them to retreat to the strongholds in the Alps. Davout added, mainly referring to Trent, which is one of the most important strongholds of the Holy Roman Empire on the southern foothills of the Alps. As long as we force the enemy to retreat to Trent, and Ning took over the topic, we only need to leave a small number of people to surround the fortress of Mantua, and then we can march westward to attack the Kingdom of Sardinia. Our army can force a crossing of the Po River from Valenza, and then outflank Messina's army from the flank of the Kingdom of Sardinia in the coastal hills. Paul Barras asked doubtfully, "How many troops do you want to surround Mantua? If there are too few troops, they will be rushed out, right? I suggest that we immediately retreat back to France before the enemy has time to unify their actions, and then organize a defense in Nice. Anyway, the French territories in Italy outside Nice are basically the territories of the former commercial republic, which is almost like something we got for free. If it's just to defend Nice, your army will definitely be fully capable of it, and you don't need top-notch command ability. You can take this opportunity to go to Paris. And Ning, I have given up such a large piece of land, so what qualifications do I have to go back and serve as the garrison commander of Paris?" Barras, "Whoever controls the newspapers can confuse right and wrong. We just need to exaggerate and throw the responsibility to the Austrians. Can't the royalist newspapers do propaganda?" And Ning asked back. Barras, "Of course they will spread the word, but our Jacobin newspapers are more popular among the people. This is a game of who has the loudest voice." And Ning, "Yes, you may be able to fool the people, but what about the facts? What about the large amount of territory that has been lost for no reason? Most importantly, what about the Milan blood-sucking plan that I have finally started? I just took a small bite and I didn't enjoy it at all." Barras, "Those things don't matter. Paris needs you." And Ning, "You'd better give up." "I will never give up my soldiers." Barras curled his lips, "I'm not asking you to give up your soldiers. In fact, we still need you to lead the army to defend Paris." And Ning, "Mr. Barras, you must not have eaten Milan's chicory cream risotto. It's really delicious. I will immediately ask Milan's most famous chef to prepare it for you." Barras shook his head, "No, I don't like cream. No, although this dish is called cream risotto, it actually doesn't use cream. It uses gorgonzola cheese and oil to achieve a creamy taste. In addition to the creamy taste, it also has the unique aroma of gorgonzola cheese." Barras continued to shake his head, No, I'm not too interested in eating. I just drink some Marseille's fish soup or eat some Provençal stew." And Ning, "This is Italy. You want to eat French food in Italy. The Italians will hate you." Barras, "There's nothing big about Italian cuisine, it's just several variations of sautéing onions in olive oil. Let's talk about Paris." Without waiting for Ning to respond, LaSalle said first, "Hey, when you think about it carefully, it seems that Italian cuisine really has to start with sautéing onions in olive oil." Napoleon said firmly, "This is prejudice." And Ning couldn't help but remind Napoleon, "You are Corsican, not Italian. Corsica belongs to France. You don't have to be so excited about the dignity of Italian cuisine." Napoleon, "Okay, it's my fault, but Italian food is really delicious, the kind of deliciousness that can make your life suddenly enlightened. The Frenchman Napoleon continued to reluctantly defend the dignity of Italian cuisine. Paris, it doesn't matter what you do. You can even bring a few Italian chefs to Paris, and then you can hold a banquet for your guests. I will go to taste the cream risotto you have always recommended. Ending, Mr. Paris, I think I have made it very clear that I will not leave my soldiers at a time like this. Paris gritted his teeth and used his trump card. If you go back to Paris now, you will definitely become the most powerful person in Paris. Then all the armies in France will be under your command. Ending, it sounds a bit attractive, but I am very satisfied with the number of troops I command now, and my officers are probably barely enough to command so many people. Paris, you will lead the whole of France and win victory after victory, just like the conqueror King Alexander, or Iskander, in history. Ending, I don't have to go to Paris, I will continue to win and conquer. Ning has made up her mind anyway. Whoever wants to go to Paris, which is so complicated and undercurrent, can go. I will stay away from it anyway. Paris sighed deeply in the face of Ning, who was unmoved. He took a step back and said, well, I hope to mobilize a force of about 100,000 from the southern region to the capital. Ning glanced at Lazar Carnot, who shook his head silently. So Ning also flatly rejected this request. No, our army has no plans to go to Paris at present. Of course, in the future, if the situation in Paris is really very dangerous, our army will go to Paris. But the timing will be decided by ourselves. Paris, okay. Okay. I will report your attitude to your friends in Paris truthfully. Ning laughed directly. His friends in Paris were all good buddies with the same ideals. Even if they heard Paris' report, they probably wouldn't say anything. Ning, go and tell Maximilien, referring to Robespierre, by the way, and tell him to get some local specialties when I fight to the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. Chapter 188. Two veterans joined forces to attack. Because the war was imminent, the streets of Milan were filled with killing. Because the policies implemented by Ning in Milan gave the Italians a great deal of autonomy, and also promised the Italians that after they had their own armed forces and could defend their own territory, the French army would withdraw from the entire territory of Milan. So most Italians really regarded the French army as liberators. In fact, another historical Napoleon was also regarded as a liberator by Italian independence activists at the beginning, but the republics established by Napoleon were actually puppet states of France, and were soon seen through by the Italians. So the Italians raised the flag of rebellion as early as when Napoleon attacked Vienna. But Ning had no intention of doing so at all. He was going to use the advanced form of imperialism, using economic power to gain benefits. For this reason, he valued the right to issue currency. In addition to the right to issue currency, other powers, if the Italians wanted them, they would give them. Because of this, now in the city of Milan, Italians are actively joining the army, ready to fight against the invaders Austrians with the French. You know, Italy in this era is not the weak chicken that was later pushed back by the Ethiopian black uncle. Italy in this era is still quite capable of fighting. Especially when the Italians were wearing red uniforms. It happened that Lazare Cano also came to Milan temporarily from southern France, and Ning gave the task of organizing the Milan Republican Army to Lazare Cano. Cano did not refuse. Although he would only stay in Milan for a month at most, and then he would return to southern France to preside over the rear work, he still took over the task of reorganizing the Republican Army. Lazare Cano took a month to organize tens of thousands of Italian Redwood Army. However, the main problem faced by the French army under Ning was similar. The Italians also lacked officers. Most of the Italian nobles colluded with the Holy Roman Empire of the Habsburgs. After all, the Holy Roman Empire was limited by the times and could not establish a ruling structure that really reached the grassroots. It still had to rely on the local noble elites. Then these local nobles were regarded as traitors and hung on the street lamps, and the Republican movement launched after Ning occupied Milan. Those who were not hung up also packed up their belongings and ran to Austria. In the European army of this era, officers were generally nobles, and Milan was no exception. Therefore, the ratio of officers in the Republican army formed by Milan was lower than that of the French army. The French army was already very bad, with each officer managing 1.5 to 2 times as many subordinates as the Austrian army, and the situation of the Republican army of Milan was even worse. The French army was able to fight so bravely and show such high quality with such a low ratio of officers, purely because of the spirit given by the Great Revolution. But it is unclear whether the Italians in Milan can perform in the same way, and whether they can forcibly rely on high morale and desire to fight to offset the shortage of officers. As for the precision shooter company that Ning regarded as a secret weapon, the training process was very smooth. The new breech-loading rifle performed outstandingly, and even had a considerable hit rate at a distance of 200 meters. In terms of firing rate, breech-loading makes the firing rate of this weapon even higher than those of smoothbore rifles, and the firepower projected by a company of troops is like that of a regiment. The key is that this is not a simple increase in the amount of projection. The front width of a regiment of line infantry is much larger than that of a company. With such a terrible firepower, this company may even be able to disintegrate the enemy who is attacking in front of it simply by the density of firepower. As for the advantage of breech-loading and shooting posture, this weapon is particularly suitable for the use of skirmish tactics. Traditional smoothbore rifles must use a cleaning rod to compact the bullets when loading, so you must stand up when using a smoothbore rifle, at least squat. There is no way to load a smoothbore rifle in a prone position. Therefore, the war of this era is in the form of queue shooting, where everyone stands in a row and shoots each other. Breech-loading rifles are different. This weapon can be fired and loaded while lying on the ground. Therefore, this weapon is particularly suitable for scattered skirmishers. Skirmishers rely on loose formations to reduce casualties when shooting against line infantry. If these skirmishers all lie on the ground like Voldemort, it is easy to imagine how difficult it is to be hit. In short, this improved breech-loading rifle has basically no disadvantages except low production and high cost. After watching the drills of the Special Shooter Company, Ning made up his mind to force the popularization of this weapon. In the history of another time and space, the rear-loading rifle gradually became the mainstream after the 1830s. At this time, humans had built a large number of railways, invented the telegraph, and the level of industrial production had also made great progress. The development of industry has made the production cost and working hours of breech-loading guns lower and lower, which finally made this weapon popular on a large scale. Ning now has to force the large-scale application of breech-loading guns in advance, basically relying on money. If you don't want to spend money, you can only rub the entire industrial chain by hand. Ning can't do such a heaven-defying thing. In comparison, the feasibility of using money is higher. Ning plans to first form an elite shooter company, and then disperse these shooter companies to various brigades, specifically responsible for killing enemy officers with precise and fierce firepower in front of their own line infantry. The elite shooter company that has just been formed is a verification of this concept. Whether to continue to promote it depends on how much role this company can play in the next war. Ning was looking forward to it very much. After all, this was the first advanced technology that he, a time traveler, had come up with. It would be great if this thing could give the enemy a hard time after being put into actual combat. While Ning was busy inspecting the troops and actively preparing for war, Paul Barras had not completely given up trying to persuade Ning to return to Paris. However, Ning was adamant. No matter what Barras said, he shook his head firmly and refused to agree. As time went by, the declaration of war from Austria and the Kingdom of Sardinia was finally delivered to Milan. It was not accurate to say so. The declaration of war should naturally be sent to the capital of the enemy country. But Ning even received the declaration of war several days earlier than Paris. Along with the declaration of war, the latest news from the spies of the intelligence department and the news of the Austrian commander were also delivered. The Austrian army that Ning needed to face was divided into two parts. One part was the remnants of the original Austrian army deployed in the Mantua fortress and along the Mincio River. After this period of reorganization, the strength of these remnants has been restored to 15,000 people. Together with the 9,000 defenders in the fortress, the total number is 24,000. The commander of this unit is still the veteran Marshal Bulla, who is over 70 years old. The Austrian corps mobilized from the Rhine gathered in Trent, an important transportation hub in the Alps. This unit is led by Marshal Wurmser. He is also a veteran in his 70s. According to reconnaissance, Marshal Wurmser's army in Trent is ready to go south through the Adige Valley at any time. And Marshal Wurmser may also send a unit to go south along the road on the west bank of Lake Garda, a high mountain lake in the Alps. Due to the limitations of terrain and transportation routes, Ning's troops now deployed on the west bank of the Mincio River north of the Mantua fortress must pass through Brescia, which is close to the Alps. Once the Austrian army passes through the west bank of Lake Garda and goes south, it can directly cut off the retreat of Ning's troops. so Ning had to divide into a considerable number of troops to defend the mountains on the west bank of Lake Garda. Despite this, Ning still had a significant advantage in terms of military strength on the Mincio River front. Chapter 189, The Serpent of Changshan. While Ning was confronting the Austrian army at the Mincio River, Messina was facing the Sardinian army. General Colli, the commander of the Kingdom of Sardinia, led the vanguard of the Sardinian army to the Siva fortress. Messina only had the original Italian army and a part of the supplementary troops, totaling 15,000 people. And Ning's order to him was to guard the transportation line from Nice to Savona. Although Ning's army now relies on Milan for its main supplies, the military supplies produced by the factories in Milan are not particularly sufficient. The only things that can be guaranteed to be openly supplied are food and uniforms that can be produced with daily necessities. Therefore, Ning's army has to rely on France to provide some ammunition and gunpowder. This transportation line is very important, and Ning repeatedly told Messina to guard it well. As an Italian, Messina himself used to be a sailor on a merchant ship in the Mediterranean, and he also traveled all over northern Italy as a merchant. He was originally a warrant officer guide of the Italian army, and he was particularly familiar with the terrain along the seaside. So Messina made a bold decision: while the main force of the Kingdom of Sardinia has not yet arrived, we will start from Carcare and attack Millesimo. At this time, the Kingdom of Sardinia's army in Millesimo had 1,500 people, and Messina went up with 10,000 people at once, so the Kingdom of Sardinia handed over this key point to the French army with almost no resistance. Then Messina sent cavalry to scout along the road in the direction of Siva, and then found out that the vanguard of the Kingdom of Sardinia in the Siva fortress actually had only 5,000 people. Messina was very familiar with the terrain of the Siva fortress. This fortress was a series of fortresses arranged on the ridge from north to south, and it had a very strong resistance to attacks launched from the east. However, when attacking from the east, if a troop was separated to attack from the south, the Siva fortress would be easily breached. So Messina made another decisive decision: to march to Siva. 10,000 French troops rushed along the mountain road to Chiva, catching General Colli of the Kingdom of Sardinia, who had just arrived here, off guard. In the battles before Ning, the French troops under Messina were basically watching the show. Seeing other troops repeatedly making military achievements and receiving frequent victories, this unit could no longer hold back. The Sardinian army that Messina faced was a traditional kingdom army. Yes, it was the kind of army that would be defeated once the formation was broken. Each soldier had a very low desire to participate in the war, and it was all driven by the officers who were noble lords. The combat effectiveness of this army was probably similar to that of the Indian army during the self-defense counterattack against India, or even worse than the Indian army. After all, the Indians at least had Lee Enfield rifles, which were much more advanced than smoothbore rifles. The defense of the fortress was quickly broken, and General Colli had to lead the remnants to retreat to Mondovi. Messina continued to march towards Mondovi, and only stationed along the Casagaglia River after receiving news that the main force of the Sardinian Kingdom Legion had arrived from Turin. At this time, the Casagaglia River was in its dry season. The source of this river, like most rivers under the Alps, comes from the melting snow on the mountains. It was December now, and the surface of the Casagaglia River had shrunk greatly. Despite this, having a river as a barrier is much better than directly defending a place without any barrier. Messina knew that as long as he could hold out until February next year, when the snow on the Alps began to melt in large quantities in the spring, the Casagaglia River would become wider and the water flow would become more turbulent. As long as he held out until that time, his situation would be greatly improved. So Messina began to build fortifications on the riverside, preparing to fight the enemy across the river. The news from Messina reached Ning's headquarters in Brescia, and Ning was overjoyed. Great! Really great! He shouted several times. As expected, Messina is a capable fighter. This early attack that caught the enemy off guard shows that he is a fierce general. As expected, the strong men in history will also be strong here. So Ning wrote a letter of commendation, and he shouted at the beginning, "Long live the 3rd Division!" The 3rd Division is Messina's division. After writing it, Ning came to his senses. Would Messina's division be called the Long Live Division in the future? No matter what, it is a good thing that the troops are in high morale and can fight. At this time, Berthier took the letter from Ning's hand curiously. After reading it, he was very surprised. What the hell, attacking when the troops are inferior, isn't it too risky? And Ning, It is the right decision to attack while the enemy's troops are not in place. Berthier, you lack such courage, so you can only be a chief of staff. Berthier does not have the talent to be a commander. He is a perfect chief of staff. It would be bad if he commanded the battle himself. Berthier shrugged. I have no comment on this. However, you appreciate Messina's actions because you are also an adventurous commander. If you show it to Davout, he probably won't agree. After all, this is not in line with military common sense. Davout took the letter and looked at it, and replied, I will capture Mondaui before stopping the attack. Berthier, what? This. Napoleon laughed. And Ning also teased, it seems that our Davout thinks that as long as there are 15,000 people, the kingdom of Sardinia can be forced to surrender. Davout shook his head, no. With 15,000 people, unless we defend the strongholds along the way without dividing the troops, it will definitely not be enough. At least 30,000 people will be enough. Ning raised his eyebrows, and before he could speak, LaSalle spoke. Do you realize that you are now saying that you can defeat 50,000 people with 30,000 people, Brother Davout? Davout, is there any problem with this? Don't we always fight with this difference in manpower? It's a piece of cake. After Davout finished speaking, all the officers except Berthier laughed. And Ning, okay, Messina fought well, and we can't lose to him. The situation we are facing now will become very bad if Wurmser and Beulah meet together. But our advantage is that they haven't met yet. It's winter now, and there is a lot of snow in the Alps. Even if Wurmser's troops go through the Adige Valley, it will take many days to walk. Therefore, we have gained precious time difference. Using this temporary advantage in manpower, we should quickly defeat Marshal Beulah's troops. And Ning pointed to the sand table in front of him and continued. Marshal Beulah was stunned by our flank attack, so he was particularly afraid that we would continue to flank him, so he distributed the entire army evenly on the Mincio River. Look at this formation, what do you think of? Of course it's the Changshan snake. Napoleon, snake, a long snake. And Ning, that's right. So we have to concentrate and break through from Marshal Beulah's center. Although it's snowing heavily now, which prevents LaSalle's cavalry from charging, we can still use infantry units to cut off the enemy, and then divide and annihilate the enemy. Napoleon, what about the fortress? I've seen that fortress, it's very difficult to deal with. And Ning, but you didn't realize that with only 5,000 people in that fortress, tens of thousands of people can be trapped inside. Because the fortress is on the peninsula, the isthmus leading to the fortress can't deploy too many troops. We defeat Beulah, force his remnants to retreat into the fortress, and then trap him with 5,000 people, and then turn around to deal with Wurmser's 50,000 people. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190, An Italian Boy's Experience in the Army. Brescia, where Ning deployed the Redwood Army recruited from the Republic of Milan. That night, a Milanese teenager named Baz was warming himself by the fire with the veterans in the army. From Rome to the north, Italy gets colder as it gets closer to the Alps. In Brescia, which is almost at the foot of the Alps, it is basically covered in snow in December. Baz rubbed his hands vigorously by the fire, trying to make his red palms feel a little better. At this time, the veteran next to him handed him a cup of hot coffee. Here, kid, cover your hands with this, it will feel better. Baz said thank you, then took the coffee cup and looked at the black liquid inside. Just by smelling it, you know that this thing is terribly bitter. Seeing Baz's expression, the veteran laughed. Kid, when you understand the beauty of coffee, you will grow up. Baz said anxiously, I can drink coffee, I am already an adult. Then try it. Several soldiers who were also by the fire said. Baz's expression froze. At this moment, someone made a puff sound, and then nodded to the distance. The Milan soldiers turned their heads together and saw a team of troops carrying golden guns covered with brass and arrogantly drove into a house on the roadside. Someone muttered dissatisfiedly, it's great that the French can live in houses, and we can only sleep in tents. It's freezing cold in this weather, and we are almost freezing to death. The old soldier was Zikiang, who had just given Baz coffee, curled his lips. Don't say it, I heard that they are the troops that General Frost has high hopes for. They are holding brand new weapons and can load bullets from the back. From the back of the gun or from the back of the person's butt. Someone asked, immediately triggering a laugh. Wazikiang smiled and said, of course, from the back of the gun. That kind of gun has a spiral line in the barrel, called rifling. It is impossible to load bullets from the front because you need a hammer to knock the cleaning rod in. I tell you, that kind of gun is said to be accurate at a distance of 200 meters. What is a meter? Baz asked puzzledly. Wazikiang, you don't know, this is the unit of length set by a French metric committee, and the French use this as the basic unit. I heard that this is also one of the achievements of the Great Revolution. This thing is quite useful, and the conversion between the two units is rounded to 1 after 10, which is very convenient. As soon as the voice fell, someone beside the campfire interrupted. I heard that the French also asked all the craftsmen in Milan to accept this unit of length, and we are not allowed to use our own units in the future. The French also brought a 1-meter ruler and buried it in the square in front of Milan City Hall. At least the Austrians didn't ask us to change our customs units of length. Wazikiang snorted, don't say it, the Austrians don't even think we are human beings, the French at least treat us as human beings. Baz, the French hanged the noble lord, allocated a house to our family, and gave my father a job. I am personally very grateful to the French, so I am here. Someone beside the campfire suggested loudly, cheers to the damn liberators. So most people raised their glasses and drank them all in one gulp. Buzz held a cup of scalding coffee and didn't toast with everyone. He really couldn't stand the bitter taste of coffee, and he was just being stubborn. While the Italians were toasting, another team of troops carrying new rifles wrapped in brass entered the same building. Someone next to the fire said, I wonder if that gun is made of gold. Don't be silly, it's just wrapped in a circle of brass. It seems to be the order of the general. The production hours of that gun could not be reduced much, and it was very difficult to produce. So the general did the opposite and added a process to wrap the outside of the barrel with brass to make the barrel look golden. Said Wazikiang. Someone next to the fire teased, how do you know everything, Wazikiang? Are you having an affair with the French? Wazikiang, you don't understand, the French are also human beings. When I was in Milan, the pub I often went to often had French people stationed nearby drinking. I was the only one who understood French, so I often helped the bar owner to translate for the French. Someone else asked, how do you know French? Wazikiang smiled, because I used to be a student of the seminary. You don't know, although the Pope lives in our Italy, the cardinals and archbishops of the papal palace all speak French, and the nobles throughout Europe all speak French. Baz said unexpectedly, is that so? Is French so powerful? Of course, Wazikiang touched Baz's head, even the Austrian king who is fighting with us now, the Holy Roman Emperor of Habsburg, can speak French fluently. Not only that, in Prussia, a little further north, everyone in the king's court can speak French. Even the Russians in the wild land in the east, their archduchesses and generals can speak French. Baz, really? What do they want to fight France? Wazikiang, how should I know? I just went to the seminary to study for a few years. How can I know what the nobles think? At this time, someone in the crowd next to the campfire said, hey, look over there. Baz looked up curiously and looked to the other side. As a result, he saw a maid who seemed to be the same age as himself walking across the street carrying a box. The person who just asked everyone to look over there said mysteriously, I heard that this is the general's maid. The general has no orderly, so he has always let his maid take care of him. It is said that the maid looks as young as Baz, but she is actually in her 20s. Is it true? Baz was very shocked. She looks even younger than me, the same age as my sister. You don't understand. It is said that the general's maid is from Croatia and is a fairy in the story. The general himself is a great magician, so he can deal with so many enemies with inferior forces. The French call the general a magician on the battlefield. They have followed the general for so long, they must know something. Baz, I thought it was just a nickname, used to describe the general's ability to command troops and fight battles. You are too naive. In the general's first battle in France, he only had 15,000 troops, but he defeated General Lafayette's army of more than 40,000. How could it be possible if it wasn't magic? The man who had been talking to Baz took a big sip of wine, then shook his head and continued. At this time, another person spoke up, No, I heard that the general received divine revelation from Jehovah and is a saint. Someone immediately retorted, nonsense, the general is a Frenchman, and he has also confiscated the Pope's enclave in Kintai and robbed all the church's property. I think he should be an apostle of Satan. This time he led his army to Italy to target the Vatican. He wants to turn Rome into Satan's capital on earth. Baz covered the hot coffee cup with both hands, listening to the adults around him talking about the legendary general, and couldn't help but show reverence on his face. He muttered softly, "That's great. I wonder if I can meet the general in person. I went to collect materials today, and those who understand will understand." Chapter 191, Veteran General Buell's Last Battle. 1792, Ning launched a battle to force a crossing of the Mincio River. He handed over all the battle commands to Davout, and rode a horse to the river to enjoy the scenery. The rumbling of the artillery created a large amount of white smoke hovering on the surface of the Mincio River, echoing the snow-capped riverbank. Ning seemed to have learned in high school geography class that northern Italy has a Mediterranean climate, and the Mediterranean climate should be above 0 degrees all year round. I don't know if I remembered it wrong or this era is colder than the future. Anyway, the banks of the Mincio River are now covered in silver, but the river water has not frozen and is still flowing. The French soldiers can only wade through the icy river and reach the other side. Fortunately, the French army was in high spirits, and the cold water was not enough to stop them. There was only one regiment of Austrians on the other side of the river. Seeing the vast number of French troops crossing the river, this regiment seemed to be wavering. Ning was observing the front line when LaSalle beside him suddenly said, "Look! Is that reflective? Is that Davout's head?" Ning burst into laughter. "Napoleon, don't be embarrassed. Davout still has a lot of hair, which makes him look like a priest. In this era, many priests like to shave their heads in a priestly style, which is a bald head with a circle of hair like cap hair around it. Generally, in this era, if you see this head shape, it is likely that the person you are facing is a priest. This is just like seeing a top knot in the Japanese Warring States period. You know that the person you are facing is most likely a samurai." Napoleon and LaSalle had a heated discussion about Davout's head shape. No one cared about the ongoing river crossing operation. There was really no need to care. The first wave of people that Davout brought over had 2 brigades, and it was not too easy to fight a regiment. One of the 2 brigades that Davout brought over was the brigade that fought Lafayette to defend the ridge a year ago, and it was considered Davout's direct line. Afterwards, Ning awarded them a flag of the Windmill Knights, also known as the Don Quixote's Sigh flag. The morale of this brigade is the best among the French army, which is generally in high morale. Previously, in Diego, this brigade rushed all the way, wanting to grab as many flags as possible, but was robbed by LaSalle's cavalry. The soldiers were all furious. Now they just wanted to vent their anger on the defending Austrians. Behind Davout, there were still a lot of French soldiers crossing the river with their trousers rolled up. From the Austrians' point of view, seeing the vast blue army rushing towards them, their fighting spirit should have disappeared in an instant. The Austrians did not collapse immediately, which shows that they are indeed a well-trained elite division. However, they were still completely defeated the moment they came into contact with the French army holding the Windmill Knights flag. Ning looked at this scene with satisfaction. Napoleon cursed, "I thought they would fight with bayonets for a while, but they just ran away like that." Berthier curled his lips and said, "Colonel Bonaparte, maybe fighting side by side with a general has given you some illusions. The general's troops often engage in resolute hand-to-hand combat with the enemy, and the general even draws his sword to join the battle himself. So you think this is the norm. But in fact, based on my military experience, this is uncommon. Whether it was the American War of Independence or the 7 Years' War, the outcome of a bayonet charge was usually decided at the moment of contact between the 2 sides, or even before the contact. Before the contact, the morale of one side will not be enough to maintain their courage, which will lead to a major rout, just like what you are seeing now." Ning raised his eyebrows. He vaguely remembered that it seemed that Archduke Karl or some famous general mentioned it in his battlefield memoirs, saying that in all his years in the army, he had only seen one hand-to-hand combat where both sides really killed each other. At other times, one side would be defeated when the charge began. Ning still remembers that in the Soviet version of War and Peace, Bagration's charge at Austerlitz was portrayed as the Russian army yelling "Ura!" and the French army starting to run. The Soviet version of War and Peace was very sophisticated and did a lot of research. The director team should have really studied the wars of that era and tried to stick to the facts as much as possible. Ning thought back to the performance of the Austrian army during Diego's time. It seemed that the Austrian army to the west of Diego was defeated as soon as Davout and LaSalle attacked. In addition, While the Austrian army was being defeated, the French troops in front were engaging in a bloody hand-to-hand combat with the Austrian army. As Ning was recalling, Davout waded across the river on horseback and came to Ning. "General, I have captured the bridgehead. The rest is up to Lasalle's cavalry." Lasalle exhaled a long puff of smoke. "Leave it to me, I will definitely kill all the scattered regiments." And Ning, "No, no. Your mission is to immediately launch a flank attack on the Austrian troops scattered on the east bank of the Mincio River. Who asked you to chase the scattered enemy?" "Lasalle, I was just joking." "Instead of joking, you should think more about how to capture Bolo alive." And Ning replied. Lasalle suddenly became serious. "Capture Bolo alive, right? I accept this mission. If you had asked me to block the bridge last time, I would have captured him alive." And Ning wanted to change his words, but it was too late. Lasalle had already turned his horse's head and ran towards his cavalry. He might really raid Bolo's headquarters and capture the old general alive. Seeing that he couldn't stop it, and Ning sighed and said, "Whatever." Anyway, the Austrian cavalry was basically lost in the first two battles. Now the Austrian troops are arranged like a snake in Changshan Mountain. Maybe Lasalle will really break through. Even Davout's direct infantry brigade will curse, because after working for a long time, the cavalry unit is the first to succeed. Davout looked at the cavalry unit that was beginning to advance, and muttered worriedly, "Is it okay to let him rush in blindly?" And Ning, "Don't worry, Lasalle is very capable of commanding brigade-level cavalry." "Davout, I've seen it, in Diego." At this time, Napoleon suddenly poked in Ning's shoulder. "Hey, look over there, it seems that you have a little Italian fan." And Ning turned his head to look in the direction Napoleon pointed, and found that the Italian Redwood army was coming from Milan. Originally, Ning was going to use all the Italian troops to defend the supply lines and use them as baggage trains, but the gentlemen of Milan strongly demanded that the Redwood army play a role on the battlefield, so Ning had to bring a brigade of the Redwood army. In addition to the red uniforms of this brigade, there is another notable feature, that is, their officers wear an iron helmet from the Spanish Grand Phalanx era with long feathers on it. It is said that this is the tradition of Italian mercenary captains. Yes, Italy had a martial tradition in the Middle Ages, and Italian mercenary captains even monopolized European war affairs to a certain extent, so there is a special chapter about Italian mercenary captains in war guidance written by British Major General Fuller. However, in an army of the Great Revolution era, the appearance of this kind of iron helmet of Italian mercenary captains can only be said to be a bit out of place. And Ning looked at the Italian team again and again, but didn't see the man Napoleon mentioned, so he asked, "What do you mean by supporter?" Napoleon had to get closer to Ning and pointed at a child in the team. "Look, that one. Ever since that child entered my field of vision, his eyes have never left you." And Ning, "You have an illusion, right?" "Absolutely not. I say, why don't you take an Italian boy as your orderly? It can also deepen the relationship between the two sides. The gentlemen of Milan will be very happy to see an Italian by your side." "I have Julian." And Ning replied. "Napoleon, no one stipulates that you can only have one orderly." "Wait, isn't Julian a stable boy?" And Ning, "I also let him do some orderly work." At this time, a messenger came galloping over on horseback. After approaching Ning, he reported loudly, "It's the report from Commander Renade." And Ning took the note and took a look at it, and couldn't help but be amazed. Napoleon and Berthier asked in unison, "What happened?" And Ning, "Wurmser has moved. The spies reported that Wurmser's troops are coming down from both sides of Lake Garda in two groups." Chapter 192. Lasalle wants to learn from His Excellency the General. After receiving the news that Andy Frost had broken through the defense line, Marshal Buell sighed. He took out his carved marshal's baton and placed it on the desk of the headquarters. The officers all looked at the marshal. "Chief of Staff Condor, it's not over yet, we can retreat into the Mantua fortress." "Buell, have you been to the Mantua fortress?" Condor hesitated. I have seen the design drawings of the fortress." Buell sighed. "Well, you haven't been there, so you don't know what the fortress looks like. The Mantua fortress is very suitable for defense, or rather, too suitable for defense. Even if the French army has 70,000 or 80,000 people surrounding the fortress, the 5,000 people in the fortress can defend for a long time. Do you know why this fortress is so easy to defend? Because it is on a peninsula, and the isthmus connecting the peninsula to the surrounding land is very narrow, and only a few thousand people can be deployed. Even if the enemy comes with tens of thousands, They can only use 5,000 people to attack the fortress, and the others can only wave flags and shout. But this limits the fortress of Mantua. This fortress can be used for defense, but it cannot be used for attack at all. The enemy only needs a small number of troops to block tens of thousands of people in the fortress. No, we can't retreat into the fortress. Retreating means that we have handed over our fate to another general who came to rescue us. Bolu said a long string of words in one breath, and then stopped to catch his breath. After all, the old marshal is over 70 years old, and can be described as old and frail. Such a long speech is a considerable burden on his body. After finally catching his breath, Marshal Bolu continued, I can't accept this kind of thing. I can't accept handing my fate over to others. No, never. This is a shame as a soldier. Condor curled his lips and no longer suggested going to the fortress of Mantua. Instead, he turned his spearhead to the Mincio River. Damn it, damn dry season, otherwise this river would not be so easy for Frost to cross. Vuksevich stared at Condor and snorted, don't talk as if the Mincio River is easy for anyone to cross now. I bet if you were in command, our soldiers who wade across the river would only become fish feed. Condor said angrily, what did you say? How outrageous. Bolu, okay. That's enough. Let's not start an internal conflict before the French come to abolish our titles. Be a little reserved and think about the obligations and etiquette of the nobility. The two men shut up. Bolu pointed at Vuksevich and said, Vuksevich, lead your troops to retreat eastward across the Adige River. Vuksevich shook his head, no, my troops were reorganized after the Po River defense line was defeated last time. It is impossible to retreat to the other side of the Adige River in the west with their entire organization. It would be better if we go north, enter the Adige Valley, and join Marshal Wurmser's troops. Bali shook his head, no, our center has been broken through by the French. If you go north now, you will encounter the French. Go east, arrive at Vicenza, and then assist Marshal Wurmser with a camera. Vuksevich was about to accept the task, but suddenly remembered something and asked, what about you? Aren't you going to retreat with us? Bali smiled bitterly and said, after 3 consecutive defeats at the hands of General Frost, I no longer have the face to go back to see His Majesty Franz II. My battle ends here. At this time, surrendering to the French should still maintain the last bit of dignity. Condor screamed immediately, no. Marshal. That madman hanged the last noble general who opposed him. He is a damn Republican, and he will hang every noble. Your Excellency Marshal, come with us. Vuksevich sneered, if you want to escape, just escape directly, without using the Marshal as a cover. Condor, I'm thinking about the Empire. The Empire cannot lose an experienced Marshal. Vuksevich drew his sword and pointed the tip of the sword at Condor, stop talking nonsense, get out of here. If the Empire needs someone like you to protect it one day, it's better for it to perish. Condor cursed, turned around and left the headquarters house. Several division and brigade commanders who actually held military power in the room remained silent tacitly. Only Vuksevich said nonchalantly, since you, Marshal, want to stay as bait to track jackals, then I have no reason not to make good use of this opportunity. I'm leaving, Your Excellency Marshal, I wish you good health. The Marshal waved his hand. Vuksevich strode out of the room. The Marshal glanced at the rest of the people and said loudly, if you want to run, run quickly. Just leave me alone to face it. The officers looked at each other, not knowing who started it first, but in the end they all ran towards the gate. At this moment, the sound of cavalry bugles came from outside the door. Then there was a deafening shout of killing, accompanied by the rhythmic sound of horse hoofs. That was the crisp sound of horseshoes hitting the stone pavement of the street. There was chaos outside, with the neighing of horses and the screams of people being hacked to death. The officers had all reached the door, but when they heard the noise, they stopped and looked back at Marshal Bula eagerly. Finally, the door was kicked open with a bang, and an officer with a beautiful beard and a pipe strode into the room. Oh, he said, so many maps, this must be a division headquarters. Then he saw Bula. Wow, the officer took a puff of his pipe and blew out a smoke ring. You look very old with this beard, you must be Marshal Bula. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect your headquarters to be where the little Corsican predicted. I am Antoine Louis Charles LaSalle, the commander of the cavalry of General Frost. I am here to capture you on the orders of the general. Bula stood up and straightened his collar. I am Marshal Bula of the Holy Roman Empire. Take me to see your general. LaSalle, of course I will take you to see him. My mission is to catch you. The last time you slipped away from the battlefield of the Po River was because I was sent by the general to block the bridge of Lodi, did you know? Otherwise, you would have been the general's prisoner at that time. Beulah, the fact is that I was not caught by you until now. Stop talking nonsense and take me to see General Frost. LaSalle, well, old man, can you ride a horse? I mean, you are at this age. I'm afraid the horse will make you sick. I'd better get you a carriage. The marshal nodded. If there is a carriage, I'll trouble you. LaSalle gave a few simple instructions, and then his deputy ran away. LaSalle respectfully opened the door and made a gesture of invitation to the marshal. The marshal walked out of the room slowly and basked in the winter sun. At this moment, several cavalrymen escorted Condor from a distance. LaSalle, who was leading the cavalry, saluted. Report, we have scouted forward in the direction of the Adige River and caught this guy. Marshal Bolu was shocked and hurried to see if the cavalrymen had caught Vukshevich together. Fortunately, Vukshevich's face did not appear among the cavalrymen. And Condor shouted, I am a nobleman, how dare you tie me up like a bundle of firewood? LaSalle laughed, oh ho ho, nobles. His Excellency the General only respects one kind of nobles, and that is those nobles who serve him in his Order of the Afterglow. Do you know how many nobles His Excellency the General has hanged? Condor roared, you bunch of barbarians, country bastards. We are nobles of the Holy Roman Empire. Does Rome know that? LaSalle, you must not have read the works of Mr. Voltaire? Mr. Voltaire is the theoretical founder of the French Revolution. Do you know what he said about that Habsburg thing? He said, this rubbish is neither holy, nor Roman, nor even an empire. The nobles of Rome had to wear purple clothes, I mean, the real Romans. What is this thing on you? Condor was completely unable to refute, and his face turned red after holding it in for a long time. Beulah, so you should really take time to read some books besides attending various balls and salons, Condor. Condor ignored it and continued to roar, I am a nobleman in Vienna. My grandfather is. LaSalle took off his gloves and threw them in Condor's face. You always say that you are a noble, then I will give you a chance to duel like a noble. To be honest, I really want to kill you with one blow, but I'm not sure if the general will be angry. I don't want to make him angry. So, let's duel. Come on, untie him. LaSalle's deputy hesitated and said, this is not good, right? LaSalle said carelessly, don't worry. The general is a noble killer. He has dueled with nobles countless times and enjoys the process very much. He will definitely praise my approach. Chapter 193 Marshal? My brother wants to be Caesar, so why would he need a marshal like you? Condor was shocked. What? What do you mean? LaSalle, why, you don't understand what I say because you are not good at French. No, I understand, I mean. You understand and you still ask me what I mean. LaSalle looked at Condor in astonishment. Are there any particularly difficult terms in my words? Even if you don't understand me, you should understand the action of throwing gloves, right? Condor, no, I am a civilized person, I don't participate in such rude activities. LaSalle laughed and snatched back his gloves. Forget it, dueling with a guy like you is an insult to my reputation. Condor breathed a sigh of relief, and his whole expression relaxed. Then at this moment, LaSalle drew out his saber and put it on Condor's neck. You don't deserve a duel, you only deserve to die here like a dog. Although Condor was tied up and couldn't move, he could use urine to express his feelings. A small piece of water stain appeared in his crotch, and then expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. LaSalle had a serious and murderous look on his face, but when he saw this scene, he laughed again and retracted his knife while laughing. I changed my mind. It might be a better idea to send a waste like you back to the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Killing a waste like you will damage my reputation. Marshal Bolu, who witnessed the whole process, commented, Condor, you really should accept the duel. If you win, you will be a hero of our army. If you lose, at least you can die with honor. Now you are the laughingstock of the entire Austrian nobility. Condor looked pale. I'm threatened. He threatened me. Bolu turned to LaSalle and said, can you please not take this coward somewhere else? I don't want to see him near my cell. LaSalle, of course, no problem. By the way, why did you let such a person be your chief of staff? Bolu shook his head helplessly. This is the situation of my free country of the Holy Roman Empire. Among my men, only Vukshevich is still useful. LaSalle, really? Then you don't complain about losing. Come on, I think the general will be happy to have a good chat with you. And Ning didn't meet Marshal Bolu until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. As soon as the two met, Marshal Bolu took off his marshal's scepter and held it forward with both hands. And Ning took the scepter and began to look at it happily. It was worthy of being a Shinra item, highlighting the luxury. And Ning's fingers were stroking the double-headed eagle carved on the top of the scepter, looking intoxicated. Berthier coughed wildly at first, but Ning ignored him. Finally, Berthier had no choice but to speak. General, you should return this scepter to the marshal. And Ning was stunned. Ah, is it supposed to be like this? Isn't it enough to just return the sword, and you can keep the rest for yourself? And Ning knew that in this era, after the battle, the winner of the navy would return the sword to the loser and invite the loser for a drink. So he was ready to return the sword, but unfortunately the marshal did not give him the sword, but the marshal's baton first. The marshal's baton is so beautiful, so Ning wanted to collect it. Berthier was speechless. It's not a big problem if you want to keep it, but it will make people have some negative comments about you. And Ning, forget it. I'm sorry, Marshal Bula, I see that the marshal's baton is a little out of control. You know, after the revolution, France abolished the rank of marshal. Bula, that's a pity, otherwise with your military achievements, you will definitely be awarded the rank of marshal. You should be the greatest military strategist of our time, and I am willing to admit that you are inferior. As soon as Bula finished speaking, Napoleon spoke. Marshal? Are you kidding, old man? General Andy Frost is going to be a Caesar. And Ning's scalp tingled when he heard Napoleon's words. Damn, could it be that the next script is that Napoleon will help me get the rank? No, it's impossible. Napoleon is such an ambitious man, he must want to do it himself. But then Ning thought of this. Although Caesar was called Caesar the Great, he never admitted that he was a king until his death. When he was stabbed to death by Brutus, his position was dictator for life. Is this the script for the future? Then Napoleon will take Octavian's position? When Ning thought of this, he suddenly remembered that he had a plugin. With this plugin in hand, he still needs some skills to imitate Brutus and stab himself. Fortunately. Napoleon, sir? What's wrong with you? And Ning realized that he was distracted. He coughed a few times to cover it up, and then solemnly returned the marshal's baton in his hand to Marshal Bula. Bula, thank you for your generosity. I will retire and return to my hometown. I will never participate in military operations against France again in my life. I swear on my family emblem. And Ning nodded. We believe you. This is the common practice of this era. After capturing a noble officer, he was asked to swear not to participate in military operations against his country, and then he was released after receiving a ransom. Speaking of this European tradition, it is also related to the Italian captains. There was a period of aristocratic wars in Europe, which was actually a kind of war game. Both sides made a formal gesture, but in the end, no one died on either side. For a long time, European nobles would hire Italian mercenary captains to fight. Once they were forced into a desperate situation, the Italian captains would persuade their employers to surrender decently and pay a ransom. Therefore, many wars in the Middle Ages did not actually cause many deaths. There were so many nobles in Europe. According to the frequency of their wars, if there were deaths, they would have died out long ago. In his war guide, Fuller called the European wars during this period the Italian Captains' War. However, this kind of aristocratic war has long been unworkable in modern times. Specifically, it has been impossible since the Hussite Wars. A large number of nobles died in the war. Like the Black Death, the war weakened the feudal lords and promoted the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. But in some places, you can still see a little trace of the aristocratic war. At this moment, Ning returned the scepter to Marshal Bolu, which can be regarded as a trace. Ning, take the marshal to rest, I still have to deal with Wurmser. Bolu hesitated for a moment, but still asked, Marshal Wurmser has moved. Ning answered truthfully, our cavalry discovered Marshal Wurmser's troops on both sides of Lake Garda, but it has just snowed heavily in the direction of the Alps, and Wurmser's troops will not advance too fast. Bolu had a dejected expression and sighed, hey, as long as I can hold on for a few more days. That's it, let's not talk about it. I wish you good luck. Ning, you can't win a war by luck. But thank you anyway. Chapter 194 Target Rivoli. After sending Old Man Bula away, Napoleon turned around and said to Ning, Andy, if you are so greedy for the marshal's baton, when we fight Wurmser later, I will shoot the cannon more accurately and take Wormser away. When we clean up the battlefield, we can find a marshal's baton. LaSalle, come on, your cannon can only shoot 1,000 meters at most. It's better to expect my cavalry to push the cannon to the distance where Wormser can be shot. Your Excellency, accidents often happen when the cavalry charges. I promise to let Wormser have some accidents when I catch him on the battlefield, and then I will give you the marshal's baton. Berthier, Your Excellency, please stop the reckless behavior of your young officers. And Ning wanted to hold his forehead. He had an illusion that Napoleon and LaSalle were two naughty children, and Berthier was a miserable old mother who couldn't clean up their butts all day long. Don't say, this feeling is quite unique. And Ning, okay, I don't want the marshal's baton that much. You don't have to go out of your way to snatch it from the battlefield for me. Then let's go back to Paris and let Mr. Robespierre push for the restoration of the marshal's rank in the parliament. Napoleon came up with a new idea. In this way, Your Excellency will have his own marshal's baton, and we will call you Your Excellency from now on. LaSalle, I think that in the future we can remove the military rank and just call you Your Excellency. There's only one Your Excellency in my heart, just like there's only one sun in the sky. And Ning felt scared when she heard LaSalle's words. Fortunately, Beethoven was not around, otherwise Beethoven would hum yeah 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 when he was in the mood, and she would be afraid that she would die in the headquarters today. While Ning was frightened, Napoleon cheered, yes, this is good. From now on, our entire army will call you Your Excellency without adding military ranks. This will make it more serious. Napoleon hesitated halfway through his words. Calling you Your Excellency is good, but what if the situation changes in the future? What changes? Don't do anything stupid. Napoleon continued, look, Andy may still become a member of the royal family in the future. And Ning gasped in her heart. What the hell, is it coming so fast? It's almost 1804? 12 years earlier. A whole zodiac year. But what Napoleon said next was, look, Andy may still marry Her Royal Highness the Princess. Huh? Ah, you are talking about becoming a member of the royal family in this way. I'm scared to death. And Ning, you guys, I'm already tired of being nagged by my own maid every day, and I don't want to be urged to get married when I go to the headquarters. Napoleon, so what's wrong with Miss Christina? And Ning just opened her mouth to answer, and LaSalle interrupted, of course she's too old, she's much older than me. And she's a soldier, and female soldiers are the same as nuns in a monastery. Noble women like Christina joined the army, usually because their families couldn't afford the bride price, so they were thrown into the army. This type of noble women also had a place to go, which was a monastery, to become nuns. So marrying a noble woman who joined the army, in the eyes of people of this era, is like marrying a nun, and there will be a lot of criticism from the outside world. By the way, noble women joining the army is something unique to this time and space. In real history, noble women like Christina who didn't get married usually went to a monastery to become nuns. In real history, there was only one type of woman who joined the army during the Napoleonic Wars, and that was the female bartenders in the army. This was real, so the opening scene of Hugo's 93 depicted such a woman, carrying a barrel of wine and searching for rebels in the forest with the vanguard grenadiers. And Ning didn't mind other people's gossip, and he didn't think Christine was old. He was just too busy and had no time to care about love, especially in the first few years of the Great Revolution. And Ning's attention was all on the current situation, and he didn't have the energy to fall in love at all. How could a woman be as exciting as the Great Revolution? Without waiting for Ning to answer, Napoleon and LaSalle quarreled first. LaSalle, the playboy, firmly believed that a 30-year-old woman was not allowed, just like a hussar who lived past 30 was a coward and a bastard. And Napoleon. Although Napoleon didn't hook up with a widow of Malmaison Castle in this time and space, he seemed to have hooked up with a wife who was much older than him in Milan. This kind of thing has a jargon in that kind of comics, called driving a big car. So Napoleon was firmly expounding on the beauty of mature women. Berthier frowned as he listened. And Ning's expression was similar to that of his chief of staff. Finally, Berthier looked at Ning, and after obtaining the tacit consent of the general, he said, "You two, now is the time to argue about women with the enemy at our doorstep." Napoleon, this is easy. Marshal Wormser made a fatal mistake. He divided his men into two teams. We just need to concentrate our local advantages and attack him all the way. After that, Napoleon drew a line north of Brescia, led 5,000 people to hold off the enemy's troops here, and then divide 10,000 people to besiege the fortress of Mantua, and finally concentrate 25,000 people, plus 10,000 people in Italy, to fight Wurmser's eastern army in the Adige Valley. Berthier looked worried. Can 5,000 people stop them? Napoleon, they don't need to stop them. In fact, their main task is to delay the enemy. As long as we wait for the battle on the east route to begin, the west route can retreat. Because from a geographical point of view, it is impossible for the enemy to reach the battlefield on the east route in one day. There is a big lake in the middle. And Ning touched his chin and listened to Napoleon's deployment. He couldn't find too many faults. But it would be bad not to find some faults at this time, so Ning said, the Mantua fortress does not need 10,000 people to besiege it, just 5,000 people will be enough. The terrain of that fortress is not easy to rush out. The rest will be carried out accordingly. Berthier, okay, I'll write the order now. So, where will our decisive battle be? And Ning pointed directly to Rivoli on the map, here. Rivoli Terrace. We plan to meet Wurmser's eastern army here. Napoleon and Berthier came over together and looked at the map. Berthier, the terrain here has not been surveyed yet, is it really suitable? The Rivoli Terrace is on the east bank of the Mincio River. And Ning had just crossed the river, so of course he had no time to survey the terrain. But he didn't need to, because this place was where Napoleon defeated the Austrian army and completely ended the Austrian army's rescue operation of the Mantua fortress. He knew the terrain of this place like the back of his hand. So Ning said confidently, believe me, this place is the best stage for us to usher in victory. Chapter 195 Urgent News. Although Ning knew the terrain of Rivoli very well, he couldn't show it directly. After all, there was no way to explain it. You couldn't say that God told me the terrain in a dream. So Ning said to LaSalle, hurry up and go to Rivoli for reconnaissance. LaSalle, do you need me to delay the enemies heading south from Trent? Ning, no, the Adige Valley cavalry can't be deployed. You just need to make sure your scouts are always in the enemy's sight. LaSalle, no problem. The guys under my command like this kind of exciting mission, and they can fight against the Austrian cavalry. Berthier, don't worry, battles between cavalry rarely happen. It's likely that they will shoot at each other at a certain distance. In this era, cavalry rarely fought against each other. When Ning and Lafayette fought a decisive battle before, the cavalry fought for several hours, which was a very rare situation in this era. In a normal cavalry confrontation, the horses will not collide with each other because of their physiological instincts. In this case, the faster side will often win, because horses are braver when they are fast, and they put more pressure on the opposing horse. LaSalle, don't worry, I will take care of everything. Just wait for news here. And Ning, be careful. I don't want to lose my cavalry commander so soon. And Ning has not found Murat yet. If LaSalle dies, there will be no one to command the cavalry. At that time, Christina and her immediate superior, Ms. Oliver, may have to command the cavalry. Those hussars are all wild, just like bandits. Let women command them, and I don't know what kind of trouble will happen. As soon as LaSalle left, Davout came in from outside. My troops are also heading to Rivoli. Should we send some troops to support Lannes? Davout looked at Ning. We have you in charge here, so we shouldn't need so many troops. Ning was speechless. What do you mean you don't need so many troops if I'm in charge? Is that reasonable? Ning turned to look at Berthier, expecting Berthier, who had common sense, to scold Davout, but Berthier said, according to the current intelligence, Marshal Wurmser has indeed divided his troops into two routes. Even if we send some troops to support Lannes on the west bank of the lake, our frontal force ratio is 1-to-1, and there is no disadvantage. With the general's personal command, our army's morale must be very high, and we will be able to exert stronger combat effectiveness than the enemy. Berthier's words sounded a little more reasonable than Davout, but only a little. It seems that Berthier and Davout really think that with the command of the battlefield magician, even if the force is 1-to-1, it can be regarded as a huge advantage. Ning had no choice but to correct this wrong perception by herself. Ning, no, I was just forced to fight a few battles with inferior forces. I had no choice, you know? If I had a choice, I would choose to concentrate superior forces to fight an annihilation war. I have decided to concentrate local superior forces on the front. Davout, I also support concentrating superior forces, but will there be any problem with Lannes? He is just a... Davout hesitated. Ning said the second half for him, just a dying apprentice, I know what you want to say. Berthier, There is no problem for Lance to be a regimental commander or even a brigade commander. He performed very well when he was in the training team and was also outstanding in tactical learning. But Berthier also said half of his words. Davout and Berthier are both traditional military men and nobles. It is normal for them to doubt whether Lance is capable of commanding the blocking battle on the west bank of the lake. The soldiers in the army will be fooled by the saying that His Excellency the General has received divine inspiration, but this set of words is obviously not very feasible for these professional soldiers. And Ning, can Messina, whom I promoted, fight? Davout immediately replied, of course he can fight, and this offensive defense is really great. Messina took the initiative to attack without Ning's instructions, catching the Kingdom of Sardinia off guard, which seemed to make a very good impression on Davout. Berthier did not express his opinion immediately like Davout. After a brief hesitation, he said, it is indeed a very bold action, but a bit too risky. And Ning, but you all admit that Messina is a talent, right? Believe me, Lance will show the same performance. Berthier and Davout looked at each other. Napoleon suggested, if you are worried that Lance can't hold on, just reinforce Lance with my artillery units. Anyway, he has the advantage in manpower on the front line, and it doesn't matter without me. I want to go to where I am most needed. And Ning, no, if the front line on Lance's side collapses, it will be difficult for your artillery to escape, even though you only have horse-drawn cannons. Napoleon, what? I thought you completely trusted Lance. Of course I trust him, but that doesn't prevent me from arranging some insurance measures. Distance is our insurance measure. Even if Lance is defeated, we have 1 day to deal with the Austrian army moving south from the Adige Valley. Berthier, very reasonable. And Ning continued to gesture on the map. Now La Salle has gone to find the enemy's main force. I estimate their current location is probably here. And Ning drew a cross on the map. It will take 2 days to reach Rivoli from here, unless the Austrians force march and rush here without sleep. But now it has just snowed heavily, there should be a lot of snow in the canyon. In this case, if they force march without sleep, when they arrive in Rivoli, we can easily defeat this exhausted enemy. In fact, the reason why Ning knew that Worms would take 2 days to arrive was because Worms did walk this road for more than 2 days, almost 3 days, in another time and space. And Ning was basically cheating. But this is different from promoting officers above their level. This cheat is very obscure. It seems that Ning just made an estimate based on common sense. Davout, it will only take my troops a day and a half to reach Rivoli. And Ning, a forced march. Yes, according to your estimate, after the forced march to the location, there is still half a day to rest. And Ning, execute. At this time, a messenger rushed into the room. Report. Urgent report from the 2nd Division. And Ning, it's Lance, give it to me. The messenger stuffed the letter into Ning's hand and saluted. And Ning opened the letter and saw that his dying apprentice had written in crooked handwriting, a large number of Austrian troops appeared in front of me and are engaged in battle. Chapter 196. This fortress is now called Lalana Fort. At this time, Lance had just repelled the 3rd wave of the Austrian attack. The French army occupied a circular fortress on the top of the hill. The outer wall of the fortress was more than 1 person high, not too high, but enough for defense. Now that the Austrian army began to retreat, the French soldiers stood on the earth wall and fired at the retreating Austrian army. Lance's forehead was scratched by a bullet, and the blood from the wound just went into his left eye, resulting in an inexplicable red filter on his vision. Only when he closed his left eye would his vision return to normal. After the battle, Lance asked the female bartender who accompanied the army to get some wine and wash the wound. This is a new treatment method advocated by Ning, and many French military doctors have complaints about this treatment method. But Lance unconditionally believed in the words of the general. After all, that was the general. The general had no orderly, so when Lana was in the teaching group, he would occasionally act as the general's orderly. He knew how knowledgeable the general was. He heard the general speak fluent Italian and German and talk directly with Italian and Austrian prisoners in the language they were most familiar with. It was said that the general also knew Latin. Such a knowledgeable person must be right. When Lana was washing his wound, the bartender teased him, "You actually used this to wash his wound. What a waste. This is a wine to give you courage. I picked it specially. Although the place of production may not be very authentic, it is definitely a good wine. Lana, I know it is a good wine. Only good wine can give you this burning feeling when washing the wound." The bartender, really? I have been a bartender for a while. When I joined the army, General Lafayette was still there. I saw those doctors treating the wounded by sawing off legs and hands. As long as the patient was injured, the injured limb would be sawed off. Can washing the wound with wine work? I think this is just the general's fantasy. Lana, you don't understand? I saw it with my own eyes. The general personally charged into the battle and got a few scratches on his face. He washed them with wine, and he was almost healed the next day. Really? This sounds like what an old drunkard would say after drinking too much. Could it be that the wound on your head was healed by alcohol? The waitress asked doubtfully. Rana said categorically, I am very sober. I saw it with my own eyes. In addition, the little maid that the general brought with him, I would chat with her from time to time. She saw with her own eyes that the general was shot on the body, but he looked like nothing happened and was completely healed in a few days. It is said that this is the effect of washing wounds with alcohol. The waitress snorted, okay, then I will wait a few days to see if it is really that effective. Rana, of course it is true. Chief of Staff Berthier has counted that after adopting the method of washing wounds with alcohol, the casualties of the troops have been greatly reduced. Many people who originally needed to have their hands and feet sawed off have returned intact. As soon as Rana finished speaking, the bearded soldier next to him said, that's what happened. If you don't believe me, look at me here. As he said this, the uncle rolled up his sleeves, revealing the scar on his arm. This is the wound I got in the battle with Lafayette. See this scar, how big it is. When I saw such a big wound, I knew it was time to say goodbye to my arm. Guess what? After insisting on washing the wound with wine every day, the wound began to heal in a few days, and you can see white tender flesh on the edge of the wound. Not to mention necrosis, my wound didn't even fester. The doctor said this is a bad sign, and it has to fester to show that your wound is healing. So the doctor was going to wipe my wound with mud, and then the general appeared. He stopped the doctor and seriously required that every wounded soldier must ensure that the wound surface is clean. Damn, I don't even know what a wound surface is. The characteristic of Chinese is that each word has meaning. Even if you encounter a new word that you have never seen before, you can guess it based on the meaning of each word. But subtitle languages such as French and English do not have this function. When ordinary people suddenly hear a brand new word, they basically have no way to guess what the word means. The old soldier with a beard cursed, wounds and wounds. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but that's what I said. It's Latin. Lanz said, I guessed it. How could an apprentice in a dyeing factory know Latin? The old soldier with a beard continued to read, in short, the general is a very remarkable person. He is 100 times, 1,000 times more remarkable than someone like me who can barely read. You can't go wrong by listening to him. The female waitress, really? Then I won't give you wine if you ask me for it again. I'll save it for you to wash your wounds when you get hurt. The old soldier immediately looked shocked. Why is that? God's horn, you can't do this. The soldiers around laughed. Lanz laughed too. At this time, the scout who was observing the mountain shouted, the Austrians are coming up again. As soon as he finished speaking, the Austrian artillery at the mountain began to fire. Lanz drew his saber and shouted to everyone, get to your posts and get ready. In this era, there was no concept of hiding from artillery. When you heard the sound of artillery, you would go directly to the position. After all, the artillery of this era was still a kind of thing that fired solid iron balls with a maximum range of only about 1,000 meters. The French army rushed up the earth wall, lay on it, and fired at the enemy below. Because the earth wall of the fortress was not long enough to accommodate all the soldiers, and they could not reload while lying down, the French army adopted the method of one person lying down to shoot, and the two behind to reload. A solid artillery shell hit the earth wall of the fortress. As a result, because the outside of the earth wall was a slope, the artillery shell bounced directly up, flew into the sky, and passed over the heads of everyone. Lanz stood next to the tricolor flag inserted in the tower of the fortress, holding a saber in one hand and holding the flagpole with the other hand. He shouted, everyone. The general asked us to hold on for at least 2 days. I will be with you for these 2 days. Let those damn Austrians never dare to look down on France again. The soldiers roared together. The Great Revolution made France a nation-state in the true sense, and the army of a nation-state is destined to be different from a dynastic army like Austria. What's more, the commander of this army is the immortal grenadier Lanz. Lanz stood on the top of the city, completely ignoring the enemy's artillery fire and bullets. He was like a Greek sculpture, looking at the swarming Austrians with pity. The Austrians climbed the slope of the outer wall of the fortress. This slope was not only used to defend against artillery, but also had another function, which was to cause the attacker's route of advance to coincide with the defender's shooting line. The French on the city wall fired desperately. At such a close distance, even a smoothbore rifle with poor accuracy had a very good hit rate. Countless Austrians were shot and fell, and then slid down the slope of the outer wall, becoming an obstacle to friendly forces. But the Austrian army still rushed into the attack range of the bayonet. Lanz roared, "Now, counterattack! Charge!" While shouting, Lanz jumped down from the fortress tower, landed in the middle of the enemy group, and cut down an Austrian captain with one sword. The French soldiers jumped up, screaming like tigers descending from the mountains. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197, Heading to the Battlefield. While Lanz was fighting, Ning's main force was rushing to the Rivoli terrace. In real history, Napoleon relied on his marching ability to disrupt the combat deployment of the Austrian commander many times. In particular, several battles between Napoleon and Archduke Karl were all because the French army moved too fast, resulting in Archduke Karl's tactical maneuvers being destroyed by the French army before they were completed. Ning, who was familiar with this, also emphasized the marching ability of the troops and often organized long-distance forced marches in training. So now the French army is moving very fast. Davout's vanguard has reported that they have arrived in Rivoli and began to deploy defenses at the exit of the Adige Valley to Rivoli. Ning's headquarters continued to move towards Rivoli with Davout's large army, and Napoleon's cavalry artillery troops also moved together. As Ning walked, he was worried about Lasalle, who had been on a reconnaissance for a day and had not sent back a report yet. Napoleon noticed his worried expression and asked, "Are you worried about Lasalle?" "Yes," Ning answered truthfully. "Napoleon, don't worry, he probably just forgot to send someone back to report. With Lasalle's character, this possibility is very high." Indeed. Ning had to admit that Napoleon was right. After spending some time together, he already understood why Lasalle didn't get the title of marshal in the end. This man is really unreliable. A marshal should be able to take charge of a field, but if you let Lasalle command a front, you will be worried. Lasalle is just an outstanding cavalry officer. The correct way to use him is to let him command a cavalry brigade. Ning, when Lasalle comes back, I will give him a good scolding. You'd better do this, Berthier said. He is your direct descendant, and even I dare not scold him. Ning, I have said long ago that there is no such thing as direct descendant in my army. I will treat everyone equally. As the chief of staff, you have the right to scold any junior officer who does not implement your plan well. Berthier was silent for a few seconds before answering, "Okay, I understand." Ning looked at Berthier's expression and thought that he probably didn't understand. During the Battle of Diego, Napoleon seemed to have ignored Laharpe's command. His artillery crossed Laharpe's entire line on the battlefield, first bombarding the Austrians on Laharpe's right wing, and then ran to Laharpe's left wing to bombard the enemy in front. In fact, Ning's army has formed the term direct descendant. Ordinary generals dare not command direct officers, and these officers themselves do not listen to non-direct officers at all. Ning was still very troubled by this. This was not the situation he wanted to see. But now he was at war, and he could not care so much. After Worms was driven away, he must find a way to reverse this situation in the army. When Ning was thinking about this, he rode past a group of troops carrying golden guns. It was the Precision Shooter Company. The breech-loading rifles they used were specially wrapped with a layer of brass by Ning, which looked golden. When Ning noticed the precision shooter's guns, the shooters also saw him, so they shouted in unison, "Long live the general! Long live your excellency!" Ning waved his hand gently, indicating that they could stop, but no one listened to him. The shooters continued to shout, "Long live the general!" Napoleon was very excited. "Look, Andy, everyone welcomes you like welcoming Caesar." Ning looked helpless. The troops just walking beside him were newly added this time, and these people were not used to shouting "Long live" when they saw him. But those old troops he had commanded for a while would definitely shout "Long live" when they saw him. It is estimated that these newly added troops will soon be led astray by the old troops. And Ning has also seen such scenes in Napoleon's movies. In the movie Battle of Austerlitz, the French army shouted "Long live the Emperor" as soon as they saw Napoleon. Wherever Napoleon went, they followed him. It was only 1792, and he was already enjoying the treatment of Napoleon during the Battle of the Three Emperors. After 1800, he dared not imagine what the situation would be like. And Ning passed the precision shooter company and came to another unit. This unit also shouted, "Long live the general!" And Ning could only wave his hand helplessly. At this time, there was also a Sequoia unit composed of Italians marching near Ning. The young boy Baz heard the shouting from the French and turned back in confusion. What are they shouting? The French army naturally shouted in French, which the Italian boy could not understand. The bearded man next to him, "They are probably shouting 'Long live the general.' They always do that," Baz said excitedly, "so we will see General Frost soon." "I think so." Baz couldn't help but look back. What kind of person will he be? "I heard that he is unusually tall, like a mountain monster in the Alps." The Italians around him laughed. "You might as well say he has a lion's head." "Baz, what is a lion?" "Don't you know what a lion is? It's a kind of beast with hair all around its face, just like it has a beard." Baz was imagining what that animal looked like when the general rode past the Redwood army. Someone shouted in Italian, "General, when can we beat the Austrians?" The general smiled, turned his head and answered in standard Italian, "Soon. It could be tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow." A short officer next to the general said, "We are heading to the battlefield now. You will definitely beat the Austrians who oppress you. I promise." The Italian pronunciation of this short officer was a bit strange. Baz heard the bearded uncle next to him say, "Why does this officer's Italian have a Corsican accent?" Baz asked puzzledly, "Where is Corsica?" "It's on the sea, a poor and dilapidated island. It used to belong to Genoa, but was later sold to France by the Genoese." The bearded uncle curled his lips and returned to the original topic. "The general's Italian has a very standard Milanese accent. He must have been in Milan. Maybe he was a guest of honor of some nobleman. But didn't he hang all the nobles?" Baz asked puzzledly. "Yes, I heard that he was nicknamed the noble killer in Paris." At this time, someone nearby said, "I heard that the general was a shoemaker before he joined the army." "Nonsense!" The bearded man said angrily, "Where can there be such a knowledgeable shoemaker? I heard that the general is the illegitimate son of the Duke of Orleans and is fostered in a shoemaker's home." "What? Doesn't that mean he is the brother of the current king of France?" "Nonsense, the general is actually the brother-in-law of the current king of France." The Redwood army argued in a flurry, but Baz was not listening. He followed the general who was gradually going away and exclaimed, "That's great. I also want to be such a hero and be cheered by everyone." Chapter 198. Drew patted his head. As the French army advanced towards Rivoli, Marshal Wormser of the Holy Roman Empire was using a telescope to observe the French cavalry unit that appeared in front of his troops. "Didn't we drive them away yesterday?" Wormser muttered. "Why are they back again?" Wormser's chief of staff Pence said, "Maybe the French goal is to stay close to us and disrupt our actions. Should we drive them away again?" Wormser thought for a while and shook his head. "No, a cavalry colonel died when we drove him away yesterday. Let them hang around here. Anyway, they can't pose any threat to our team. Order the entire army to speed up the march. We must reach the Rivoli Terrace today." Chief of Staff Pence looked embarrassed. "This may be a bit difficult. There is a lot of snow in the valley, which will affect the marching speed." "Wormser, the report from the front line shows that Beulah has been defeated, and the remaining remnants are guarding the Mantua fortress. We must rush to rescue the Mantua fortress as soon as possible. It has to be fast." Pence, "Yes, it has to be fast. I will let the troops speed up." Davout had arrived at the Rivoli Terrace at this time. He immediately checked the pass between the terrace and the Adige Valley and laughed out loud. "No wonder the general wants us to advance at full speed to occupy the Rivoli Terrace. If you give me 10,000 people, I can stop the attack of 20,000 Austrian troops. The Rivoli Terrace leads to the Adige River Valley, and you need to walk along a Z-shaped slope. The troops occupying the terrace can cause huge casualties to the enemies climbing the slope by throwing stones. If the enemies in the river valley want to rush out of the valley, they must walk along this Z-shaped slope like the gate of hell. Only by climbing up the slope can they see the town on the Rivoli Terrace." Davout continued to survey the terrain of the terrace and soon came to a conclusion. To conquer the terrace, no matter how many troops come, it will not be enough just to walk through the river valley. We must separate some people and walk through the mountains in the north. If we attack from the mountains, the troops on the terrace can only rely on a ridge more than 100 meters high. The Rivoli terrace is surrounded by a circle of hills more than 100 meters high, forming a natural barrier. However, although this hill can provide a certain degree of defense, it is actually very limited. After all, it is too short. If the attack was launched from the north of the plateau, the defenders would have very limited resources to rely on. However, if the attack was launched from the river valley, it would be difficult to succeed unless the troops were 3 times more powerful. After surveying the terrain of the plateau, Davout suddenly realized something. This plateau is suitable for defense by a small number of troops, but not for an army with superior forces to launch an offensive war. Especially against enemies coming from the river valley, because of the terrain of the river valley, it is almost impossible to fight a war of annihilation, unless troops are sent through the mountains to take Trent. After Davout finished speaking, his adjutant asked puzzledly, "What do you mean?" "What I mean is that our general may have made a mistake. He should have sent me here to defend, and then the army will return to support lands." Davout said seriously, "No, that's not right." "So that's what the general meant." The adjutants were all confused. "What do you mean?" "We have to keep moving forward and head straight for Trent. The general is preparing to close the door and fight the dog. Leave a small number of troops to delay the enemy, and then go straight to Trent. This will be an unprecedented war of annihilation." "Adjutant, really?" "But the order given to us by the general is to occupy the Rivoli Plateau. If we only occupied the Rivoli Plateau, the general would have made a fatal mistake. He wasted his superior forces on terrain that was not convenient for attack." "Do you think the general would make such a mistake?" "No, the general always emphasized that we should give full play to our initiative and not blindly follow his orders. And Ning did say so, but he said so because he knew that he was not very strong and had to rely on these famous men to win the battle." But Davout obviously understood this instruction in a different way. "So, this is the test that the general gave us." Davout shook his bald head and said decisively, "He only told us to come to Rivoli, and then wanted to see if we could see through his true intentions." The adjutant suddenly realized, "So that's it." Captain Bonaparte also ignored the general's order to move on the right wing and ran to the center army to bombard the Austrian army without authorization. After that, the general even rewarded him. "Davout, don't be like that, he is no longer a captain." "Sorry." The adjutant shrugged. Davout's adjutant was a traditional French officer, and he looked down on the dwarf from Corsica. "Davout, so, we leave troops at the entrance of the plateau to block the enemy, and the rest of the troops continue to move north, over the mountains outside the plateau, and head north to Trent. By the way, we must tell the general our decision. Bring a pen." When Ning saw the letter sent back by Davout, he turned directly into the expression on the old man's phone on the subway. "What the hell?" He carefully read Davout's letter again, and then took a breath. He realized that he had made a huge mistake. He only remembered that Napoleon beat the Austrians in Rivoli in history, but forgot that Napoleon was playing defense when he met the enemy in Rivoli, and the French army was at a disadvantage. On his side, because he sacrificed lands to resist another enemy, he had an advantage in manpower, and he was going to fight an offensive war. In this way, it was not appropriate to choose Rivoli as a battlefield, because this terrain was not suitable for launching an attack on the Austrian army in the valley. So if the troops were really piled up on the Rivoli plateau, the final result might be staring at each other with the Austrian army in the valley, and no one could do anything to each other. It can be said that this was a very big mistake. If Davout hadn't given Ning a way out, this matter might have been stuck. So Ning immediately started acting. He looked at Davout's letter and smiled. "Ha ha ha, you are worthy of being Davout. You immediately understood my true intention." Napoleon was very curious. "What true intention?" And Ning stuffed the letter to him. "Read it yourself." Napoleon quickly read Davout's letter and suddenly realized, "So, your real intention is to attack Trent?" Ning, "Yes, the mountains north of Rivoli are actually not easy to walk, so the Austrian army chose to go through the Adige Valley. We have to take advantage of this point of the enemy. Davout's troops will pass by the Austrian troops in the Adige Valley. There is only a high mountain between the two troops." Napoleon was overjoyed. "Great, what a bold use of troops." And he secretly wiped a cold sweat. It was a close call. I almost exposed the fact that I am a lousy military strategist. And Ning, next, we will use a force similar to that of the Austrian army to defend against the enemy on the Rivoli terrace and create an opportunity for Davout to launch a surprise attack on Trent. In this battle, we have already captured a Shinra marshal, and I don't mind capturing another one. Chapter 199, Vukshevich, who narrowly escaped death, brings news. LaSalle led a cavalry detachment and had been wandering in front of the Austrian army for a day. Because he had been surviving in the wild under the noses of the Austrian army, LaSalle had only eaten a little dry bread in the past 24 hours, and had only slept for a short while, but this did not affect his vigorous energy. Yesterday, the Austrians sent cavalry to drive LaSalle away, and the two sides had a warm and friendly hand-to-hand fight. LaSalle was sure that he had cut off the fingers of an Austrian hot major, so the man could not hold the knife. If the knife fell during a duel, a more noble duelist would allow the other party to surrender with honor. LaSalle did not think much about it. He chose to be a noble duelist, because by doing so, after the news spread, the noble ladies at the ball or salon would favor LaSalle more. Yes, LaSalle is different from General Frost, a duelist who would kill people when he initiated a duel. LaSalle's duel is to increase his charm in front of the girls. Girls will not like an aristocratic killer who kills people like crazy. Girls will only be afraid of such people. So, after the enemy's knife fell to the ground, LaSalle stopped the attack and prepared to allow the other side to surrender with honor. As a result, the Austrian turned around and ran, running towards his own camp without looking back. The snowflakes raised by the horses' hooves even splashed on LaSalle's beautiful shawl. Hey, bastard! I won the victory. LaSalle rode his horse to chase, but the Austrians' frontline hunters began to shoot at him. These hunters were actually elite air rifle hunters. They were still some distance away, but their accuracy was amazing. LaSalle had to stop his horse, turn around and distance himself, and watch the major run back to his own army. LaSalle shouted at the Austrian in dissatisfaction, "Damn it! I wish your entire right hand was cut off. Damn it!" In fact, this was not just a simple vicious curse. The poor medical skills of this era, even if only the fingers were cut off, could eventually develop into a serious injury that would require the entire elbow to be cut off. After all, the Austrians did not know the trick of washing wounds with alcohol, which was advocated by General Frost. After letting the major escape yesterday, LaSalle kept complaining for almost a whole day. He was waiting for the Austrians to send cavalry to fight him in a hand-to-hand fight of honor, so much so that he forgot to send knights to inform his general of the situation on the front line. This morning, LaSalle discovered another thing. It seemed that someone had gone out of the valley path and entered the Austrian army in the Adige Valley. The whole army was bustling early in the morning. LaSalle used a telescope to observe the Austrian camp in confusion. He only saw a wounded general being helped into Marshal Wurmser's tent. LaSalle, what the hell? Marshal Wurmser looked at Vukshevich, who had just been helped into the tent. Why did you come here? Vukshevich took the wine handed over by Chief of Staff Burns and drank 3 mouthfuls, then heaved a sigh of relief, looked at the old general and said, "I am here to inform you through a small path that can only be walked by one person. Marshal Beulah has been defeated. There are as many as 30,000 French troops crossing the river." Marshal Wurmser was shocked. 30,000 people. Vukshevich, maybe more. Chief of Staff Burns said loudly, "That's impossible. General Colley of the Kingdom of Sardinia wrote to us, saying that there are at least 30,000 French troops in front of him. In fact, there are not so many," but Colley was confused by Messina's resolute defensive action and thought that he would be the first target of the French army. But at this moment, no one in Marshal Wurmser's tent could tell the marshal about this. Wurmser frowned. There are 30,000 troops fighting against the Kingdom of Sardinia on the seashore, and 30,000 French troops crossing the Mincio River. Theoretically, at least 5,000 troops should be deployed in the direction of the fortress. Then, the troops attacking the western front have sent back news that the attack has been frustrated. So there are at least 10,000 troops near Brescia on the western front. Does the French army have so many troops? Pence, we received news that the total strength of the French army is at most 50,000, but now according to the collected reports, the French army has at least 100,000. After all, they have to leave a large number of troops to defend the key points. Milan must also leave at least 10,000 people, otherwise the Italians may rise up to resist. Pence's statement that 10,000 people should be left in Milan comes from Austria's own experience. The Italians have been fighting for independence, so the Holy Roman Empire must leave about 10,000 troops in Milan. After the defeat of Diego, Bulla transferred the garrison troops of Milan to the Po River line, which directly led to the loss of most of the officials of the Holy Roman Empire in Milan, leaving only one governor who relied on his relationship with the Italian nobles As a result, as soon as the French army entered the city, the governor was hanged. In short, according to Shinra's own experience, Pence judged that there were 10,000 French troops in Milan. He never thought that Ning only left 2,000 French troops responsible for logistics and did not defend Milan at all. While muttering, Pence laid out the French army's chess pieces on the map, and suddenly all of northern Italy was a French chess piece. Wurmser had a serious expression. "It's bad, we are now in a state of division. After we enter the Rivoli Plateau from the mouth of the Adige River, I'm afraid we will have a decisive battle with the superior French army. Should we fight in the river valley? The terrain in the river valley makes it difficult for the French army to deploy its superior forces," said Chief of Staff Pence. Vukcevich interrupted, "Marshal, with all due respect, if I were you, I would retreat to Trent now." The marshal frowned and looked at Vukcevich. "Why? Tell me what you think." Vukcevich placed a French military chess piece on the map, with Trent as the position of the chess piece. "You are facing probably the most outstanding military strategist of our time. He likes to fight annihilation wars. Although I did not participate in the Battle of Diego, I participated in the Battle of the Po. During the Battle of the Po, he directly sent his cavalry to raid Lodi behind the front line." Vukcevich drew a line on the Po plain as he spoke. "Look, this is the encirclement route of his cavalry, heading directly for our rear." In addition, in the Battle of Diego, the situation was actually similar. He blocked the exits to the north and east of the hilly terrain near Diego, completely blocking the way for our army's retreat. Judging from Frost's performance in these two battles, I guess his troops must be outside the valley and marching towards Trent. "Excuse me, if you don't retreat immediately, our army will be blocked in the valley." Marshal Wurmser frowned and fell into deep thought, but his chief of staff said indifferently, "Are you overestimating the leatherworker? Everyone who despised him because he was a leatherworker was defeated by him." Vukcevich said firmly, "We may be facing the most talented military strategist of this generation. Marshal, retreat to Trent immediately. Now the enemy situation is unclear, we can hold on to Trent for a long time, and the Mantua fortress has enough ammunition and food reserves to hold on for a long time. Collect intelligence in Trent, and at the same time transfer reinforcements from the country. It will not be too late to launch an attack when the troops are superior." Marshal Wurmser pondered for a long time, then he sighed, "I am a good friend of Marshal Bulla, and I know his weight. I will not despise the French general who defeated him, never. Order the whole army to cook immediately, burn the tents and baggage that cannot be taken away after eating, and retreat to Trent." Quotation mark. Chapter 200. From now on, you can just call yourself Wu Peo Peo. LaSalle looked at the Austrian tents in confusion. "What the hell? Why are they burning the tents?" Generally, burning tents is a measure taken when the military situation is urgent and there is no time to slowly withdraw the camp. In front of LaSalle, the entire Adige Valley was filled with thick smoke from the burning of the Austrians' tents. There was so much smoke that LaSalle could hardly see the movements of the Austrian army. At this time, LaSalle finally remembered that he should report this change to General Frost. After the messenger sent by LaSalle disappeared in the snowfield at lightning speed, he continued to observe the movements of the Austrian army. The snow melted by the burning tents flowed into the Adige River, making the river water, which was originally in the dry season, suddenly turbulent. LaSalle looked for a long time and finally confirmed one thing: the Austrians are going to run away. Why? And Ning, why? Why are they running away? In the town of Rivoli, Ning, who had just arrived late last night, loudly questioned the staff around him in the newly established headquarters. "Napoleon, has Davout been discovered?" Ning, "No, Davout is very serious. If he is discovered, he will definitely report it." Since there is no report now, Davout, who is competing with a university in the mountains to the north, should not have been discovered by the Austrians. There was another heavy snowfall last night. The mountains between Mount San Marco and Lake Garda should have become more difficult to walk. At the same time, it also means that it is difficult for the enemy's reconnaissance to hide in this direction. After all, reconnaissance in this area is mainly done by cavalry. Light infantry can also conduct reconnaissance, but it is not common. After all, No matter how fast light infantry runs on two legs, it is just so-so. In the snowy mountains, cavalry targets are large and easy to be discovered. Davout would not fail to notice the enemy's reconnaissance. After all, he is Davout, not LaSalle, who is careless, nor Messina, who occasionally loses the chain. That is Davout. So the question is, Davout was not discovered, why did the enemy run? LaSalle sent back the news, and Marshal Wurmser even burned the tent. In this era, productivity has not reached the point where materials for setting up tents can be ignored. Even for a big country like the Holy Roman Empire, it takes a lot of time to equip a troop of tens of thousands of people with tents. The Austrians burned the tents, which means that they think the situation has reached a very urgent time and must act as soon as possible. And Ning faced the map. Why? Why did the enemy run away? He turned his head to look at Napoleon. What do you think? Why did they run away? Napoleon spread his hands. You don't know. How can I know, Andy? Nonsense. You are Napoleon, one of the greatest military strategists of this era. That's why I ask you. And Ning looked at Napoleon speechlessly. Napoleon also looked at him speechlessly. It is estimated that Napoleon's current thoughts are a copy of Ning. You are the greatest military strategist of this era, Andy. There is no other. You don't know. Why are you asking me? And Ning wanted to hold his forehead. He wanted to complain about Napoleon. Don't blindly worship me. I can only play Total War. I can only play Urbanization in StarCraft, and I can only use the awesome Corps troops to play Invincible in Panzer Corps 2. I studied artillery at the Paris Military Academy, and later taught mathematics at the Military Academy. I am really asking for your opinion. Napoleon and Ning stared at each other for a few seconds, then he sighed. Maybe the Austrians misunderstood the strength of our army. You see, Lannes resolutely blocked them in the west, and then Messina launched an offensive in the south facing a superior enemy. Maybe the commanders on both sides of the enemy overestimated the number of enemy troops in front of them. And Ning touched his chin. You mean, Wurmser got wrong intelligence and misjudged our strength, so he retreated? Napoleon shrugged. I'm just speculating. As for what the truth is, we can only wait for war historians to judge in the future. The key is, how should we react in this situation? And Ning looked at the map, pondered for a moment, pointed to the Adige Valley and said, we will go north along the valley. Since the enemy has run away, we will chase them. Our principle is, if the enemy advances, we retreat, if the enemy retreats, we advance, if the enemy stays, we harass, and if the enemy is tired, we attack. And Ning accidentally used the words of his idol again. Napoleon. Oh, very good. At this time Berthier pushed the door open and said, what's good? And Ning, how is the situation of the troops? The troops are in very good condition, with high morale and sufficient supplies. The troops are having breakfast now. And Ning, you will arrange for the troops to set off immediately. Go through the northern mountains? Berthier asked. And Ning, no, more troops cannot be deployed in the mountains. Go through the Adige River Valley. You received the news when you went to check the situation of the troops just now. And Ning handed the urgent letter from LaSalle on the table to Berthier. Berthier glanced at it and frowned. Why? How did the enemy run away? Davout was discovered? It shouldn't be. Although Mount San Marco is not too high, it is very steep. It is difficult to climb in such heavy snow. The implication is that the enemy in the valley is unlikely to send scouts to cross Mount San Marco between the mountains to the north and see Davout's troops. And Ning, I don't know. Anyway, the enemy has retreated. We plan to chase along the Adige River Valley. After Davout in front surrounds Trent and stops the enemy, we can block the enemy's butt. In this way, the enemy will be sandwiched between the eastern mountains and Mount San Marco. The so-called eastern mountains are actually part of the Alps. They are more than 1,000 meters above sea level and very steep. Only those old hunters can climb up and down on such mountains. The large army can't move at all, not to mention that it's snowing now. And Mount San Marco, as Berthier just said, is not high, but it is steeper and very difficult to climb. The section of Mount San Marco near the Rivoli Terrace is relatively easy to climb. There is also a small church on the mountain. Going further north, the Alps are to the north, and the height of Mount San Marco is rising all the way, becoming more and more difficult to climb. As long as the enemy is blocked in the Adige River Valley, it is basically completely surrounded. Berthier, I'll get the troops moving now. When the order to march came down, Bez had just gotten rid of his morning sleepiness. Why are we marching again? He frowned and asked the bearded man, "Didn't we say we were going to have a decisive battle with the Austrians here?" The bearded man smiled and said, "It seems that the Austrians were scared away by General Frost. We have to chase them now." Yes, the soldiers didn't know anything about military affairs. In their opinion, the Austrians didn't come because they were scared away by General Frost. It was just that simple. Baz showed an admiring expression. "So amazing." "That's not true. Yesterday when I went to ask the French waitress for wine, I heard a piece of news. Do you know how General Frost defeated 40,000 people with only 10,000 people?" The bearded man asked mysteriously. Then he vomited and sprayed a breath of wine on Baz's face. Baz covered his nose and tried to hide away. The smell of alcohol mixed with the smell of rotten leftovers on the bearded man made him want to vomit, but he couldn't resist his curiosity. "Tell me, how did you defeat them?" "It was the general who personally chopped off 10,000 heads and defeated the enemy," the bearded man said seriously. "That's what the French army said." Baz was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth. "This is amazing." "Right, so you see those old French nobles, the revolution took their lives, but they still came to be loyal to the general. It's because of the general's unparalleled bravery." Baz turned his head to look at the flags of the Sunset Knights and the gray uniforms that symbolized the glory of old France. "It's great," the young man murmured softly. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.